You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 356, The Mandalorian, Chapter 16, The Rescue. This is the final episode of this season. I think we got a lot of some stuff that I think we knew was coming. We got some things that we weren't aware that were coming, and we got some really great big surprises. Hopefully by now everybody's seen the show. But, you know, here to break all of this down, obviously, every week with me is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. I'm still kind of reeling, to be honest, from what happened just a few days ago. But how are you feeling tonight?
I'm doing all right. I got my Red 5 shirt on. I've got my Luke Skywalker mug. I'm all set, man.
You're all Skywalkered up there.
I tell you what, I can't wait to talk about reactions and just what you did, because I know what I did.
I know what you did too, because I got nothing but text messages from you with words that I can't say on the air.
Right.
So, but more on that here in just a little
bit.
Of
course.
Yeah, of goodness, right. That's exactly what it was. Not. Well, it was, but it was, you know, it was a very visceral kind of reaction. So
it was very animated. But it was
animated is a
positive.
good word. Yeah, positive. Definitely positive in that regard. All right, we've got a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this. But before we do, we're going to announce the winners from the Star Wars Celebration prize packages, the Cantina Cast prize packages that we did. So the response, honestly, was overwhelming. I think everybody, with the exception of maybe a couple of people, didn't get the answer right, but I don't want to call them out here.
You so badly want to, though. I
really do. But it's okay. I went ahead and threw your names in as well. So if you got it wrong, because I wasn't sure, maybe it was like, you know, younger children or whatever. I wasn't going to judge anybody by that. So if it is, as long as you entered and we could see that you had, you know, subscribed to YouTube, you were in. So we had a ton of entries, and they came in from a lot of places, from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Obviously, that's where we asked them. But then we had people messaging on Discord. There was people in Messenger, people commenting on YouTube. So again, I took all of that in because it was just in the spirit of the contest, right? I mean, I'm not a rule stickler so much. So without further ado, let me give you the winners here. So the winner of the Apprentice prize package, is a gentleman by the name of Colin Brixey. So Colin, congratulations on winning that. I got his address, I think, and that'll get out in the mail sometime this week. And the winner, no, we're not going to make you wait. Okay. The winner of the Master package is Mandy Jakubka. I think I said that right. Mandy Jakubka. Did I say that right?
Yep, I think so.
Yeah.
That's how it's spelled at the very least.
That's how it's spelled, yeah. So congratulations, Mandy, on winning the Master package. You have a ton of stuff coming to you. And again, I will get that out in the mail sometime this week. Although I went to the mailbox a couple days ago, and the line was like 45 minutes. So, but I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it to get these out. So,
welcome to the holidays, my friend.
Yeah, welcome to the holidays. So, congratulations to everybody once again for participating in the contest. Hope you guys had a lot of fun with that show that we did. And who knows? Maybe we'll do more of these. And again, just a quick shout out to everybody at Repop, especially Thor and Jasmine, who were amazing to work with and gave us the opportunity to kind of bring that stuff to you guys. Any final thoughts there? Congratulations.
No, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad we were able to do it, and it seemed like everybody got a kick out of it. So it was worth it. Glad we could throw it together.
Jakubka. I wonder if that's her. That's there. Someone's spelling that out. So, okay. All right. Again, we'll get started into the episode. Thank you for everyone for being here for the live show. There's a number of people. I'm sure you're all going to stick around, even though we've already announced the winners, because this is a great show. Well, this is a great episode. I don't know if it's going to be a great show, but it was definitely a great episode and gave us a lot to discuss. So, Jonesy, let's start with talking about the, again, traditionally, overall thoughts around the episode itself, whether it was, the impact of the episode. We can talk about the music, the visual effects, pacing, the fitting, all that stuff. Just what are your kind of final thoughts here, especially considering this is the, final chapter of season 2, and we're not going to get any more Mandalorian here for the better part of 12 months, or about a year from now.
Yeah, it's actually kind of surprising we're not going to have any content for a while. And I was a little surprised that we didn't, from a Din standpoint, we didn't really get much of a cliffhanger here, which I thought was a little interesting to lead into the next season. So a lot of questions we can answer later on. But overall, I thought the pacing was I think it was pretty all right. There were some times where I think it was a little bit sluggish. But it was good being able to see them recruit Bo Katan. There was a little bit of inconsistency in some of that, and then there was a little bit of inconsistency on the Darksaber too at the end. But I generally thought it was great. I was so happy we had Bo Katan back. The ladies were kicking butt through the halls. I like that the Dark Troopers at least got more screen time than Phasma got. I think still it's pretty close, but
yeah.
As much anticipation. But it was kind of cool to see the Dark Trooper. We got a little bit of information behind the scenes too of Pershing as well as the Dark Troopers. So answered some very minor questions we may have had on a couple of things, but overall. But man, the music with the Dark Troopers though, we have to talk about this because it was this weird synthesizer, almost shredded guitar kind of thing. It was just this metallic sound. And
I was thinking like dubstep, like it was like borderline dubstep music. Not exactly, but that's the vibe.
It was just kind of this noise of sorts. But I liked that it was like every time we saw them, or at least 2 or 3 times we saw them, we had the same kind of music going, and it was just so unique and so cool. And I like that Mandalorian is playing with different styles of music here, and Ludwig is doing an amazing job here of giving us something different for Star Wars, which we've been craving for so long. So it's really cool and unique to have this now.
Yeah. I've got some thoughts I want to, so just quickly.
I avoid every single relevant topic.
That was like the safest response to this episode, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire here in just a little bit. Okay. You're not getting away that easy. Trust me.
Fair enough.
But no, overall, I think the episode was pretty impactful. I think this episode for me calls the question, which was the stronger season, 1 or 2? And I'd be interested to hear what people say. You can drop your comments now. What was the better season between season 1 and season 2? We'll come back to that answer or that question here at the very end after we've had a chance to digest this one. But yeah, overall, I mean, again, I think the pacing was pretty good. I'm with you. There was parts in here where it felt like the momentum slowed down just a little bit because they had to give us some backstory, or maybe they dwelled a little bit too long. But I think there's a good reason for that, especially when we get to the bar scene with Bo Katan and Boba Fett and all that. I think they're obviously setting all of that up here a little bit later. So I get it, but I did think it hurt. I wouldn't say it hurt the episode by any means. But overall, I mean, the ending itself was probably worth the price of admission, right? Just that speculation, the anticipation that we had leading up, over the last 2 weeks, ever since we knew that he called out to a Jedi and that a Jedi would respond, we knew this was going to culminate in the kind of final episode here, and in which it did in a huge way. But I think it sets the tone for a lot of things too. And again, I don't want to steal too much because I want to save that for the very end. But overall, I really enjoyed the episode. I was shocked. I was absolutely floored. The response and the feedback on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and you name it, anywhere you went after that, or anyone you spoke to right after that, was completely leveled. And, there was a lot of people that were, I would say the majority of the people that I'm in close contact with or in my circle of friends or just circle of acquaintances or even just the people I follow on social media, generally positively enjoyed this episode. As with all things in Star Wars, there are people out there that are going to take issue with one thing or another. They're probably the vocal minority, and so we tend to see them and focus on them the most. But I think overall speaking, I think this was a pretty good episode, and I've got a lot to say about. Just one last thing before we get it. And I'm not going to get into this now, but I do have a lot to say around this. There is one piece that's really just picking at me, and it's this idea that you can't like The Last Jedi and like The Mandalorian, or that somehow this was fan service to the point of in your face sequel trilogy or in your face Kathleen Kennedy. That is so skewed and so it's hard for me to honestly reason. And I get it's just an opinion. I don't want to get on a soapbox here with it too much, but I think this episode actually does a lot for the sequel trilogy. And I plan to get into that here a little bit later as well. Like, I really think there was an earnest intent in what they were trying to do, and some people took that as hey, it's fan service, and we got what we got the Luke Skywalker that they didn't give us. And while all of that's true, it does not delegitimize anything in the sequel trilogy, much less the Last Jedi. So I'll Let me park that there. I'll come back to that here in a little bit. So But yeah, overall, great episode. Okay. So how was that? Did I do better than the little skirt
go
you were
home.
doing? All right, you go.
I didn't want to ruin all the other content.
I know. We've got so much here.
4 hours to plug here. So.
4 hours. That's right. It's a 4-hour show tonight. So hopefully you're buckled in and ready to go because we've got, again, a lot to discuss. All right, it opens up with this pursuit, right? We've got Slave One chasing this Lambda class shuttle, which, I mean, it's like the best of both worlds. We've got The Empire Strikes Back in Slave One. We've got the Lambda class shuttle from Return of the Jedi. It's like, whoa, here we go. We're back in the original trilogy all over again. And we find out that Pershing is aboard the ship and he's being taken somewhere. Now, we talked about this, I think, the last episode or maybe the one before that, where unless they were going to jump right into this episode was going to be about an hour long. And they did. They really jumped right into the thick of all of this. And we shouldn't be surprised at this point because it's something that I think they've done now or showed us that they've done. It's kind of a blueprint for them in terms of just getting the story moved along when they've only got 8 episodes to discuss. But I got some general questions. Did you put any thought into where Pershing was? Was he on his way back from wherever he was doing experiments, or maybe he took the blood and took it somewhere and now he's on his way back? But and I mean, again, suspension of disbelief. We don't really need to get into how did they know where he was or any of that stuff. It's really not important, right? I mean, we probably want to know those things, but in the grand scheme of the story, it's probably not important. But what did you think here when you saw him? Were you surprised that we just jumped right into this and there was Pershing sitting on a shuttle and they found him?
Right. If you don't want to suspend disbelief, then we should probably just say that he was on the way back to the ship. Because the other thing we didn't have is a really clear picture when they do arrive back to the light cruiser. We didn't really have a clear picture about whether or not the shuttle was expected or not. I think that's where some of the confusion is also coming from. But I mean, they also had to do a jump to light speed and all these other things. But yeah. I'm with you though. I like that they just jump right into it. We don't necessarily need to answer all of that. Sure, it kind of takes us a minute to reorient, but as soon as we're on the ship and we have it and we know where we're going, I think those problems, if you want to call them problems, kind of go away. And we could say that we wanted, another 15 minutes of this, but I gotta be honest, I just don't know if it would have provided a lot of, excitement or really all that much more that you really need, because you start feeling another episode at that point.
Right.
Of the look for Pershing, when we already know where the light cruiser's at. Now we just need a way to kind of get on. And so it makes a lot of sense. I was fine with it. I've had to suspend a lot more disbelief in other places than I had to do on this one. So I'm not having to really worry about this, but I do like that we at least saw it though. And we got to see Pershing. We got some confirmation about the clones and his participation there, which we already knew because of the insignias and the badging and everything else. But it was cool having a reference point for some of it that confirms, yes, these are the things that we already know. They're true. Now we can kind of move on. But he must have come back. I'm assuming he was coming back to the ship for whatever reason. Maybe it sounds like they've already harvested the blood, but presumably they could keep coming back for more. So yeah, it sounds like an errand type of thing. And maybe he was taking the blood to wherever the donor is trying to, whoever or whatever they're trying to do with it. He's the one that needs to be the one to administer some of this stuff. And we have a lot of guess as to what that is. If he's a cloning master, then we saw a lot of this in Rise of Skywalker, right? In the tanks. So we have an idea of what's happening here.
Yep. There's the other thing I really liked about the beginning is really all of this season ever since Boba Fett came back is we knew we would get more Slave One, and man, we're getting heavy doses of this. Whether it's the action of just simply him in dogfights,
right,
or this scene where the shot of them in the cockpit and the Slave One just kind of coming over right in front of the camera, right in front of the window, and just the sound and the roar of the engines and stuff. I mean, that's all great stuff. But then later on to find out that he's got these ion cannons, which I think he had in Legends. Like they were in there. They're like in a cross-section guide. It's been labeled. I know there's some people, asking about whether this was inserted. Was this new to Slave One for the sake of the story? But no, this actually was something that existed, well before this episode came out. But just the amount of Slave One that we're getting, I think has been really great. And then the boarding sound, right? That was like ripped right out of epised 4 with the whole ship coming together.
The reveal of Slave One coming up over the cockpit, though, I mean, just the massiveness. I mean, you don't really equate like the size of the ships very much. It's always difficult to get a little bit of scale.
Yeah, right.
Just that showing up in the front of their screen and seeing Boba. I mean, Boba looked like a tiny little action figure in there, which was, I kind of got a laugh out of that. But
right.
Just the sheer mass of this thing was really cool to see, and it was very intimidating. I would have probably not been as calm as those guys were.
We get into the cockpit and we get some confirmation that that Pershing is some kind of a clone engineer, is what I guess they refer to him as. So we've had our suspicions about that ever since season 1, ever since we saw him for the very first time. So I guess that was confirmed. So not a really big thing there, but along with the cloning in the Siege episode, right? We had something there. So is it safe to say at this point, are you willing to go on record as saying that, or do you have a harder, firm opinion about, or even just speculation about whether or not this is somehow tied to a Snoke/Palpatine, resurrection of some sort, or do we think there's something else here at play?
I think it speaks directly to it, because if we think about this, the Emperor's condition at this point is still probably very, very critical. Even though we've been years past Jedi, it seems like this regeneration process is not a quick one. And so even if they've stemmed the loss and saved his life, he's not in a state that is going to be supportable unless they have something. And so it makes a lot of sense that they would use this for that purpose. I mean, there could be 100 other reasons, I suppose, that they can come up and create from a writing standpoint.
Yeah.
But from a narrative aspect, I think that makes the most sense. I mean, it's something to jumpstart Palpatine in order to get him back to being maybe coherent, or have a voice, and being able to now not rely on his previous instructions and now be a bit more involved about what the next steps of the final order will actually look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm with you 100%. Like, it feels like this is where like all paths will diverge there at some point. Maybe not, it may not be the ultimate, final point for all of these stories to go, maybe. But I think it is going to play into this, and I think it's going to factor into it. And I love that, because we don't necessarily have to see Snoke, right? We get to see how the sausage is made, if you will, right? We get to see all the background stuff that's going on and how the First Order comes to power, and all the things that we just wondered about, or they've skirted around in like the Aftermath trilogy or the Bloodline books, right? All that stuff that we've just kind of been left to our own headcanon. We're getting some good context and good background on it, which I think would be pretty exciting to hear.
Right.
Which, yeah, I have a lot to say about that too when it comes to Luke, because we'll more on that later. There's been a lot of Alderaan in this, really in 1 and 2, right? Like, and I thought about it, and I was like, okay, they keep coming back to Alderaan, and I don't think we're going to get anything. Well, we're not, because Alderaan's gone. But if it's too soon to talk about that, but
that was a low blow, man.
I know. I'm sorry.
You should join the Empire.
I hear they're recruiting right now.
Oh boy.
They're no, but and I wondered why there's so much Alderaan. Now I get it. We've got Cara Dune in there, and she's from Alderaan, and so it's relevant to her and the character and all that. But I do feel like this is a way for Favreau and Filoni in that team, mostly for Favreau because he's a writer. But I just feel like he's putting more emphasis that I don't think we necessarily got in the original trilogy, right? Like, Alderaan happened. And even Princess Leia, I mean, don't get me wrong, she was very stoic, and we would expect probably that kind of reaction from her, and just be able to, like, I don't have time for tears. I've got to move on. There's a bigger mission here at hand. But it never felt like we really got to feel the impact of what Alderaan was and how it impacted many people, and just who all was involved with it. And I think what they're doing here is kind of that justice, if you will, kind of coming back to it and giving it some more emotional weight that I don't think we got from the original trilogy. Or do you think there's anything else into that?
Well, yeah, and I think it's the general context and the scope of what it meant to the galaxy, right? Yeah, that we have other, and I like that we've had a couple of different altering views into it, and now someone that was on the Death Star was unexpected, I think, a bit. And of course, her retort to that, which one, was kind of cute.
Yes,
that was a bit funny. But yeah, I like that we come back to it pretty frequently. So do we need to come back to it all this often? But maybe not. But I like that we get just a slightly different perspective on it with each of these characters, and we don't need much. And I think it's telling us and showing us Cara Dune in particular, and her ultimate reaction to it, while she certainly gave a lot of advanced warning, her cold-bloodedness in this moment, I think even took Din by surprise.
Yeah, he looked at her like, whoa, hit a nerve. Yeah, well, rightfully so. But
yeah, right. I mean, again, she said, your last chance. It wasn't that he just kept running his mouth, but man, he just took that knife and he just kept digging it deeper and turning a little bit deeper and dig it. I mean, he knows what these things mean to the rebellion type of folks, and what this meant to them, and probably how demoralizing it was for quite amount of time.
Yeah, I think we get these. So this, along with some of the stuff in Rogue One, and then just, honestly, some of the stuff that we even saw in Rebels to some extent, they're hitting on this theme of the rebels being a terrorist group, because he says, do you know how many millions were killed on those bases? And we've talked about that here on the show or in Discord or anywhere else, right? About how, again, there were a lot of people on that Death Star that were really evil, but there's probably arguably more people that were not necessarily evil, just doing a job, who died. And that's just a casualty of war, I guess, if you will, especially a fictional war. So I don't want to put too much weight into that. But at the same time, he says destroying your planet was a small price to pay to rid the galaxy of terrorism. And a lot of people have made this argument that the Rebel Alliance is a terrorist group, and technically they don't fit that bill, but I can see it, right? You can see that perspective of it, or that certain point of view. And later on, it gets hit again, because Gideon, when he's talking to Din, he says that they've already made their way to the bridge, and everybody on the bridge is dead, being the murderous savages that they are. So again, we're getting these viewpoints, and I think we saw a lot of that in the Battlefront 2 games too, and in Inferno Squad, right? This other side of it, that even the people that are not necessarily evil, not necessarily good, but are just out there doing a mission, they truly believe that these guys are rebels or are terrorists, and they're doing, the good work of keeping the galaxy in order. Not necessarily keeping the galaxy safe, but at least they're maintaining order at the behest of their own, windfalls and stuff like that. But it is an interesting perspective, and I definitely I can see where they get this point of view, and I love the fact that they're just re-emphasizing it in stuff like this.
Right. Yep. Totally agree.
We get to so this goes on to the next piece here, where we're on a planet. The minute I saw it, I thought it was Lothal, and I know people have been speculating as to what planet it is. We don't get a name of it. I wish we would. Like, I love that Rogue One was like, hey, we're going to start giving you names of stuff, and then nobody has touched it since. Which, come on, Star Wars, just put the names out there. It's fine. It would certainly let us sleep better at night. But I thought it was Lothal. Maybe it's not. It reminded me of Lothal more than anything. But Slave One sits down in front of this. It looks like a bar. We see Bo Katan ship there as well. Was it not the Gladiator? What was the name of her ship?
I can't remember.
Somebody give us the name of it. I can't remember now either. I just had it was on the tip of my tongue. Starts with a G. But yeah, so we see that ship there. And again, I freaked out when I saw it, because I was like, okay, there's a Mandalorian here. Right. Kind of thought it was going to be Bo Katan, and sure enough, it was. But there was like the beginning of a joke, right? Two Mandalorians walk into a bar is kind of what you see there. But I love that image. And if you look, like, everybody's looking around in the bar itself. You see they've already got two Mandalorians in there. In walk these two Mandalorians who probably have a different walk or different presence than the two that just came in. So they're thinking, okay, something's going to go down here in just a minute. But there was as those patrons are getting up and they're leaving, they kind of realize that something's about to go down. And once they make he says, I need your help or whatever. And she says, no, not all Mandalorians are bounty hunters. Some of us serve a higher purpose, which I thought was kind of almost pretentious of her. Right. But you got to remember, she is royalty. She is a true Mandalorian. She probably isn't your everyday run of the mill serf kind of worker man Mandalorian. Right. She's at a different level. And it was refreshing to kind of see that. I wouldn't say it's not necessarily out of character, but I think it's just another dimension of her character that I don't think we've ever seen before. But any problem in her speaking like royalty to some extent there?
No, I mean, her goals and objectives are different, and she's very focused on what she needs to do next. And she didn't want the distractions. I mean, she was happy to provide a distraction for Din for her help, but for them, there's just one goal in mind, and they're just going to keep pushing forward to that goal and until they achieve it. And I mean, that's why it was important for him to mention that it was Gideon. So he has what she needs, and she emphasized what later on what that was important to do, and who gets him at the very end. Yeah, but I mean she's royalty. I viewed it more of her just saying that I've got to bring the clans together. I need to restore our former power. I need to take my rightful place. That part kind of rubbed me a little bit wrong, like the taking of her place in the episode, but still. The Mandalore culture is in shambles. It's spread out. It's fragmented, and this means a lot to Mandalorians in general. Yeah. And it was really curious that she called Boba right out immediately. You're not Mandalorian, and that he just kind of like shrugged and said, never said I was. Right. It was kind of an interesting statement, because we affirmed him as a Mandalorian just a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, and I think and I've seen a lot of discourse around this too, is in terms of what is a Mandalorian. I think this calls to question. It called to question again what is a Mandalorian? And again, I think there's just really two viewpoints, which are going to, at some point in this series, I think we're going to solidify on what a Mandalorian is, like once and for all. It just kind of depends on where you come from. But
do you think it was more that he was a clone?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. If you watch the scene, Koska, and the minute Boba says a word, Koska and Bo Katan immediately turn and look at him like they've heard this sound before, this voice before. And if you think about it, there's so many thousands. I mean, she even says there's thousands of you, right? Of these guys, it's just a common voice that you would hear at this point and easily recognize. And so I think they thought that he was nothing more than a clone that somehow survived Order 66. You got to remember that Bo Katan, like, she comes off pretty aggressive and pretty strong. One, because, you know, they recognize that he's a clone, but she's got a bad taste in her mouth, too. She, along with a number of other people, when Order 66 happened, had to contend with a full force of clones that were now working for the Galactic Empire. And so, you know, I think that all kind of factored into why she came off so hot, right? She was on fire with this guy the entire time. And even Koska was taking cheap shots at him, calling him like the sidekick and, you know, all that. But it just felt like it was unjust. But I think that's probably where a lot of that was stemming from. She also says you'll never find him, which I thought, I thought of like, so sure are you, the Yoda from Empire Strikes Back, right? But it does sound like she's been in search for him for a very, very, very long time, and that being Moff Gideon and certainly the Darksaber. So hopefully we'll get more there at some point in some of the backstory. I don't know where we would get that, but I'm looking forward to it if we do.
Yeah, it's clear their trail has gone cold multiple times at this point.
Yeah.
And she's still reeling from losing the Imperial from a few episodes ago.
I think one of my favorite lines from this episode, maybe in all of Star Wars, well, if that isn't the Quokka calling the Stifling slimy. I'm going to use this. I don't know when or where. It'll probably be at some business meeting, and I'll never have
to remember it. I'll be impressed.
Quokka. I don't know what that is. No, I'm just joking. Maybe not. There's another great line. There's some great dialogue here where she's talking through the glass of a Bacta tank. I was like, oh yeah, right. That's right. That's a good one. And then finally, Mando just is like, okay, look, I need to entice. He tries to entice, Bo Katan and kind of put an end to this before it escalates any further, and says, like, look, I know where Moff Gideon is. He's on a light cruiser. You can have the sword, and I sincerely take him. Like, he really does not give a crap about the sword, right? He does not want it. He doesn't understand the history. He doesn't know anything about it. He doesn't want to know anything about it. All we believe when we take him at face value based on what he said at the very end of the last episode, and that all he wants is the child. So we get into the more fighting back and forth about the armor and all that, and the kind of fight breaks out, right? They take a cheap shot at him at being a clone, saying he's a donor, or that the donor gave him that. And again, they don't understand that his dad is Jango Fett, I would assume at this point.
Right.
And then he's kind of
have any idea. They didn't seem to have any idea who he actually was.
Yeah, and I don't know if that would have mattered, but I think there's an interesting story there to tell if and when these guys meet up again, which I think they will. So at the other, he takes a cheap shot at her, calls her princess. It's almost, yeah. he's not. He doesn't.
Han Solo too.
It does remind me of Han Solo, yeah. That fight breaks out, which I thought was a pretty good fight. And I know some people were like, well, it seems like that's out of character. But if you remember back in season 1, I mean, Mando was fighting Vizsla in front of the armor, and she didn't do anything. She just stood there the entire time and let them almost beat each other out, kill each other, until finally she intervened, I think, at that point. But that is kind of, even though Boba Fett's technically not a Mandalorian by the definition of, Bo Katan and some of the other ones, he didn't grow up in those customs and those ways. This is not uncommon for Mandalorians to do. They just go at each other's throats, and right. I mean, that's how they establish rule of power with the saber itself. So not out of character, I don't think. But what did you think of the fight there?
I liked it. They were both giving, and so it wasn't just one sided of, Boba's a badass and he's just going to take everyone out. It was great. Especially with someone who was much smaller than him and had the skills and to keep up with them. And much like the fight where the armor was watching with Din and Vizsla, when you got to the stalemate aspect of it, is when they were like, okay, that's enough. We've all shown what we have here. Let's cool off and figure out what we're going to go forward on now. And and start making a plan for the bigger fight that we have going on. Now, her comment, though, was a little bit interesting. If we would have if we would have shown all that spirit, we would have been able to drive them from Mandalore. That one didn't hit the mark with me, like really at all. but I kind of get where she's going with that. But I like that we got to the standoff stage of it, with the fire and all of that, and yeah, that's a good place to park it.
Yeah, I've got I don't know. We'll have to see how the High Republic turns out in terms of content wise, and we're definitely going to have to come back to more Mandalorian stuff before season 2. And this is one of the topics I do want to talk about. I don't know if we may have to tag it with another topic or intertwine with it with another topic in some way. But the fact that she says that they lost their spirit, like it implies certain things to me that are very uncharacteristic of Mandalorians, right? And so I think I think the more interesting thing there is, how did they get to that point, right? How did they get to the point where their spirit is so vulnerable that they allow the Empire to kind of come in and take over, or again, I'm making assumptions here, but something happened there, and I think I'd like to dig into that here at some point of what happened to Mandalore. Maybe that's the name of the episode we call it, but
right.
All right, this next part is probably the more crucial piece for me because I think this sets the stage. I think they are explicitly telegraphing exactly what we're going to see. Maybe not the primary focus, but certainly a heavy focus of season 3, because she says we will keep the ship to retake Mandalore. So I'm already envisioning season 3. It's Bo Katan. It's Axe's Wolves and Koska and that whole crew already on the ship. And I think this is the ship they use, right? I think they commandeer this light cruiser and they're running around in this instead of necessarily Slave 1, because that's going to be with Boba. And we don't have the Razor Crest anymore. So he got a pretty big upgrade here if she doesn't claim the ship as her own.
When you got TIE fighters and other equipment presumably on board too.
How cool would that be if they're like launching those TIE fighters and flying around in those and using whatever they can, right? I mean,
right.
That'd be really neat.
Quite the other side of things to Rogue Squadron of what we've had announced.
Yeah. So so that's number one. Then number 2, she says, if you should manage to finish your quest, I would have you reconsider joining our efforts.
Right.
So I mean, this is and again, I was like all cheering because this is all kind of coming true as far as what I've been hoping would happen since season 1. But it looks like we are definitely going down this path. And now that everything is over and he is, quote, technically finished with his quest, I think he's going to reconsider, and I think he is going to join them and help her, because he even said deal, right? She makes him the deal, and he's like, fine, I'll help you. Or he's some of that extent, right? That he's going to at least follow through with it.
Yeah, and later on, it was very much the same thing. I'll do whatever you want. Just right. I mean, that's his priority. The only thing he needs to do is make sure the kid is safe and meets up with. If there's a meetup, then there's a meetup. But of course, he doesn't know that at this point. But he just wants to get it done, and if that means committing to something else later, so be it. He's got nothing going on. His calendar's open.
Yeah, his calendar's fair enough. That's non-committal, but I think it's going to happen. They wouldn't spend. This is one of those scenes, like I said, where I felt like it was going on too long, and they were giving us too much, because really they didn't have to give us any of this stuff, but they did, and I think they're setting the stage for season 3. And then the last thing she says, Mandalorians have been in exile from our home world for far too long. So we kind of already knew that. But again, it just kind of reemphasizes this point that they're going to probably go there in the next season. So,
right. And Dante has a couple of comments here in the chat. I'll just bring them up here. So he says, fair enough. That's what Den says, but it's very non-committal. And again, so he may reconsider, but he's not really committed to reconsidering, or he'll reconsider. Doesn't mean he's going to join them and do that. But and Dante agrees with us, but he doesn't have a choice. He's going to go do it. And
I'll say this, like, I won't go so far as to say that he's going, like, season 3 opens up with them doing just this. I mean, they've got if we're not going to get a time jump, more on that later, then he may not necessarily join this effort immediately, right? Maybe there's stuff he's got to settle. He's got to get Kara back, and stuff going on with Grief Karga. Maybe there's things that are going on with his, the watch and the armor and all that. But at some point, I think he is going to get put into this position of going and making a decision about whether or not to help. And it could be for his own selfish reasons too, like more than just, I'm going to, I said I would do it and I'm going to do it, right? So there could be more to that. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
Or there's a jump and he already did that and now he's out.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it might be. So we'll speculate a little bit on that later, and then next year probably.
Yeah, a lot probably next year. There's so Bo Katan, she makes it clear that she wants to kill Gideon and take what is rightfully hers. I think this is the line you said kind of rubbed you kind of the wrong way here. She says Mandalore will finally be within reach. I mean, again, it's just Din's kind of like, yeah, whatever. I don't really care about this, or I don't really care about Mandalore. He has no reason to care about Mandalore. He's never grown up on there. Probably never been there. But I think this is going to change over time in the series, and so I'm kind of excited to see the development here about.
Well, and he still truly doesn't understand what the Darksaber represents.
No,
he has no idea what this thing is or why everyone's so hot to trot over it, and what that history was leading up to this moment from Bo Katan and from several years prior. So he's just in the dark. He's like, I don't care. It's a weapon. Do whatever you want. Doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, and that's like really evident when he just hands the lightsaber or the Darksaber over to her. Like, fine, whatever. I concede. Take it. Not mine. They're okay. So we get to the next part here is the plan, and so Bo Katan says the plan is they're going to she's going to be in the light cruiser, or sorry, they're going to be in the Lambda class shuttle, and Boba Fett's going to come in and chase them down, pretend they're shooting, and the idea is they're going to jump right into the chute at the front of the light cruiser, and Pershing steps in while they're kind of talking about all of this, and he tells them, look, this is not going to work. He gives them more information than he technically should. But I don't think this is out of character either. And I think I've seen some people ask the question of like, why is it that Pershing was helping them out? I don't necessarily think he is technically an evil person, right? He is just the scientist. I think we got a glimpse of where he felt with Grogu, Baby Yoda, the child, right? Back in season 1, like it felt like he had a bond too, or he had a connection in some way, even if it was just pure scientific. Right? He didn't want this living thing to die for just stupid reasons, right? But I think that was kind of clear. But I do think he had a bond, because really he didn't have to do any of this stuff. He could have just sat there and just been a prisoner. But he decided to help out and gave him good, valid information, because I think he really did. He kind of wanted the good thing. And I had predicted that earlier at the very beginning of the season that Pershing would join the crew in some way. I don't know. Maybe that's still a door that could be open. I think they still need him for some things, because if they are going to go down the path of, okay, so why, what was the blood for? Where did you take it? What was it? What are you going to use it for? Right. He has to be there. He's got all the knowledge. He has all the answers.
Right. And we didn't see him once they crashed the shuttle inside the ship. So we don't know. Presumably maybe he's with Boba.
I have assumed he's Boba. Yeah. That's how I took it. But
by the end of the episode, that is unclear. So maybe he's with the ship. I don't know, but I like the morally ambiguous characters, though. So I don't really want him to have a bond or necessarily. I just want him to, like, this is just for science. Like, this is just so this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to study a subject like this. This just doesn't happen. And he's just energized by all of that. And yeah, he probably doesn't want all the bad things to happen to the kid. And he wants to keep it alive, because the longer you keep it alive, the more you can study and the more you can do. And let's be honest, Pershing's probably afraid for his life if he fails too, right? So he needs to keep that motivation going, and it always works better for the kid to stay alive and be able to do that. So I don't necessarily, he can have a bit of a conscience, but I don't need him to have a really great conscience. I'd rather him still just say, no, I just want to understand what this is and what this means, and figure in whatever I can do with it, and not lose my head in the process.
Yeah, I loved Kara's line of, "Oh, great, an objective opinion." She's like so salty, and which rightfully so. But
right,
I got a chuckle out of that. We speculated earlier in the season about the make or the mark of the Dark Troopers. It sounds like it seems like, did I get it wrong? It seems like it's flipped. Like they went with he said it's a third generation, but I could have sworn the third generation was a hybrid of droid, or you could wear it as a suit of armor, but not that it matters.
I think they were 100% droids, if I remember right.
So maybe it was Mark II that was that. Then there was one that was a hybrid, or maybe that never even came out.
Yeah. But so I like that the phasing of it and the complete automation of it, which is really curious, though, that they solved the human problem. What is the human problem? Is it conscience, like we see with Finn, like in Force Awakens, or what is the flaw aside from their terrible shot?
I think it's the vulnerability. Like,
well, maybe so, but
right. I mean, like the fire, right? When he hits him with the flamethrower, and it's just sitting there all ignited, and that thing just kind of turns and stares him down. Like, I doubt that would have happened if a human or a being was inside the suit.
True, and they're still squishy in the squishy spots, which is interesting, because it seems like they haven't solved, the joint problem, which is what did see in the old comments or comics and things like that, where these things were full body suited up. There were no joints that were exposed and those types of mechanisms. So clearly we need to have a way that they're killable, but still a little bit inconsistent. But I like that they reference phase 3, so it still acknowledges that there were 3 phases of this, and it's again nice little callbacks to the original source material on it.
Right? Yeah, I love that. Any thoughts around why Mando insisted on going alone? So in the context of that conversation, right? They're talking about, and he's like, "I go alone," and she's like, "Okay, fine. We'll be the distraction." So the plan is the girls go forward, they distract everybody. He sneaks out a little bit later and then makes his way out to the brig and rescues the child. Right, that's the plan. But I thought it was interesting that he said he wanted to go alone. That could just be a convenience, right, for the sake of the story, and what they were trying to tell. But I don't know. I really couldn't come up with a good reason as to why he would have wanted to go alone and he wouldn't have taken somebody with him.
Yeah, I think the only other thing is that he wants to be the one to see the kid, or he wants the kid to see when he pops in the cell and have that moment of reconnection. I guess maybe to speak to what you have is just this bond, and he wants to be the one to share that moment with Grogu.
Yeah. The next scene is in hyperspace. Again, more original trilogy love. Seeing the Slave One in hyperspace was just eye candy. It was really cool to see that. And I wasn't expecting Peyton Reed. By the way, we didn't even talk about what he did in this episode. I thought it was amazing stuff. So, but him, pulling back the camera, I was not expecting that Lambda class shuttle to come into frame, which I thought was really cool. But so they're flying through hyperspace. She says Moff Gideon is mine. Got it. She's making it very clear. And we'll talk more about this, I promise, here in just a little bit. But she's making it very clear that she has to be the one that takes out Moff Gideon. However, Kara's like, hey, he's ex-ISB. He's got a lot of information. She's now got a new badge. She's got a new role as a marshal, right? And reports up to the New Republic in some ways. So there's a pretty good penny to be fetched here. Should she bring him in alive with the amount of knowledge and information he has at this point? Absolutely. So I think that interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth bringing him in if you can.
Yeah. And then you got Boba and Bo Katan, which I thought this was a good moment. Like up until this point, you would not have expected them to both say, good luck, be careful. And they did. And this feeds into Albert's headcanon and Albert's speculation about where this series is going, and Mando coming back to all of these people that he's met as Mandalorians like Boba and Bo Katan and Cobb Vanth and bringing them all together to go back and retake Mandalore. I do like the fact that they left it at that, because I know some people want Boba Fett to be the old Boba Fett. And again, I'm not really interested. Even him sitting on the throne, I think is fine, but I do think he's a changed person. I don't think the Boba Fett would have just said, don't worry about me, just be careful in there. The way he said it, it wasn't snarky. It wasn't sarcastic. It sounded sincere. And given what those two just went through, and they really haven't been together very long, it just feels like out of character. If he was the original Boba Fett, the original Boba Fett, I don't think would have said anything like that. He wouldn't give two craps about it, right? As soon as this thing's over, I'm done. I don't want anything to do with you guys. But
yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'm too much. He just would have walked away.
Yep.
But yeah, so we can debate that a little bit here in a few minutes when we get to the throne about what may be next for him.
All right, we're getting into the big action now. So the boarding party. They land. They pull off this plan pretty well. Boba, fakes the shots and comes in. I think you get the sense that Moff Gideon knows what's going on. Like something's not right here, right? These guys aren't standing down. The shuttle's not standing down after we've told them directly to do so. Bo-Katan gets in. She gets aboard the cruiser, lands a shuttle. And then Boba Fett takes out those 2 TIE fighters, and then he jumps off to hyperspace, and we don't see him, obviously, until the end credits. So all good stuff there. I don't want to jump to this too much, but, man, I got to say, like, Bo-Katan, Cara Dune, Fennec, and Koska just together as a team, you essentially got, like, an awesome team. You've got 2 scouts in the Mandalorians. I don't call them scouts. They're kind of multi-purpose, really, right? You've got a sniper or a sharpshooter in Fennec, which was awesome. We got to see her. They all played up to their strengths too. And then you got Cara Dune, who was acting like the heavy artillery. I mean, she's got literally this 2-handed, repeating blaster that she's holding up. It was a great little combination. I thought they did a great job. I mean, just them mowing down stormtroopers, which is really not that difficult to do, but it was really exciting to see what they could do, how they worked. I mean, they worked well off of each other. They complemented each other. They had never really been together they hadn't really fought together at all, but it felt like there was a chemistry there. So it wasn't lost on me. But what did you think about that whole sequence there?
No, I absolutely loved it. And what was really cool when they were on the bridge, it was very Clone Wars and very Rebels, where they went off the sides of it and then they just come up and, kind of DFA, right? So death from above, basically. But it was really cool. I mean, it's just great callbacks, and the way that they did it and the pose that they had and, physically in the form was perfect. And watching Fennec, go around the boxes and kind of bumping everything here and, headshotting him from a, awkward angle was great. I mean, it just speaks to her skill. And I liked it. I mean, they gave each other little looks and little nods. The only weak part in all of this was the gun jamming. I mean, really?
So that jamming.
I just don't, come on. I don't understand why.
I can give you the reason why.
Okay.
It was solely for gratuitous Gina like ass whooping. That's all it was. It was a reason for her to take this thing and just use it as a club and show that she didn't have to do that. She could hit people over that. She got to throw somebody back over. I mean, they were really trying to play up the fact that they've got what's her face?
Physical character.
Yeah, physical. Yeah, the physicality of these people, these actors between Gina and what's the lady that plays Kusker? I don't know her real name. It was the wrestler name. But I mean, you want to take advantage of that and the fact that they are athletic and agile, and you want to play that up. So I really think that was the only reason. Because I watched that scene over and over again, because I was like you the first time. I thought, why would they do a gun jamming thing? Like, this is like so cliche. I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. It's probably just so that we can see more badass women taking people out with weapons that, and using them in ways that they weren't really meant to be used in or something. So go back and watch a scene. I think you kind of see what I'm talking about there.
I can get on board with that.
Yeah. It was just fun. I mean, it wasn't anything but that.
It was, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The Dark Trooper.
It's very cliche.
It is cliche. No, I get it. It totally is. But I think I kind of enjoyed seeing her. I mean, she takes like 2-3 stormtroopers out with the gun without firing it.
Yeah. Oh, and then she got to look real mean when she got it working and just mowing them down coming out of the thing. So I mean, I like seeing her angry face.
We got to see We got to hear Dank Farrik and Son of a Mud Scuffer. So I'm going to use those.
Language on the show is out of control.
I know. This is
that was TV-14. Man,
it's not appropriate. Disney Plus. Okay, the Dark Troopers are activated at this point in the episode. There was a moment there. So I don't know if you guys follow. I'm not going to digress too much, but there's a person. I think we've all seen him. Have you ever seen Hip Hop Trooper?
No.
He's the storm in the red with the Adidas stuff on.
Yeah.
Okay. If you go back and watch when they first show those Dark Troopers light up, there's lights on the side. There's 3 lights that run, right? And then the reflection casts 3 lights on the helmet and then 3 lights like on the shoulders. It looks like, to me, and it's red. I don't know. It could be not. It just looks like they're paying homage to Dark Trooper or Hip Hop Trooper. Maybe they aren't. It was the first thing that jumped out at me. I was like, whoa, it's the Hip Hop Trooper, but maybe not. But it was all these guys were very, I hate to use the word Terminator because I think people naturally go to that because that's what we're used to. But the other thing that felt like was just more IG-11, like the way they moved, their mannerisms, their actions, just over general movement felt more like IG-11, which you would expect since these guys are, assassin droids or artillery droids or whatever the heck they are.
Right.
And I really like that one that puts his hands to the door and pulls it apart and you can see his face. I mean, that was that kind of scream Terminator, if you will, but it was good stuff. I thought, what did you think about the CG on this one? Because there was the only problem that the only piece I had a problem with was they all moved in unison, right? Like at the exact same time. And I guess that's kind of what we saw with, the clankers and most droids that are kind of a unit before, but I would have liked to see them all kind of, and it probably would have been more money and that's probably why they did it. But
sure,
seeing them have their own individual mannerisms or movements, I think just slight variations would have been better. But other than that, I thought they looked great. What did you think?
Yeah, something so they're not just tanks, right? Because they're just immobile tanks for the most part. I think to your point, I thought the CGI was fine. Actually, the troopers themselves I thought looked great. They never did. I don't think they ever had a moment of lack of realism of what they were fighting, and I thought it worked really well. I like that they actually were a force for like Din to contend with as well. Right? He was getting tossed around, and I'm sorry, man, getting punched in the face over and over and over and over was just, man, I was like squirming. It just looked like it really, really hurt. And you could hear him grunting under the helmet.
Yeah, right.
Just concussion after concussion. But I liked, I don't know. It was also a little bit like the spider episode. You know, he had the hands in the thing. He's trying to shoot it to back off. So it was a bit of the same type of thing there as well. But I like the cleverness of Din though too, of being able to do the evacuation and the airlock, and thought that was a great move too. But no, I thought the graphics on this thing was fantastic.
No, I did too. I really did. And that whole fight scene, like I called these guys punch bots. I've also called them rock'em sock'em robots.
They look like rock'em sock'em. Yeah.
I want somebody like Wookie Nuts. If you guys don't follow Wookie Nuts, go follow him on Instagram. He does amazing Photoshop stuff and it's all Star Wars Photoshop. But I'm going to send him one, and nobody, maybe I shouldn't say that. I was going to send him one that says, can you take the Dark Troopers and somehow integrate them into like a Rock'em Sock'em Robots kind of ad or commercial? I don't know. Well, he does a lot of great stuff, but yeah, they were always punching stuff, and they started with punching Din's head, which I think really did a good job of showing us just how structurally sound that helmet is, because the wall gave in before the helmet did, which I think was kind of cool that, that the Beskar is that durable.
Right. But it also, so it was interesting because when I was watching the scene and, they're taking shots, it was all deflecting. I was like, okay, maybe they did use the Beskar for these things. And the droids are made out of Beskar. And like, how are you going to kill that if they're impenetrable? Of course, we saw that that's maybe not the case later on. It wasn't the case later on, but it still just gave you this idea that this was really, really strong stuff. This isn't normal, Durasteel or anything like that. There is something special to this element that they're wearing.
Yeah, I don't. I was when I first saw the bolts fire, like deflecting off the Dark Trooper, I was like, oh, it's Beskar. Cool, we called it. Then later on, Luke's just cutting through them like butter, and so I'm like, okay, well maybe I don't know. You could argue, okay, that's Luke Skywalker, and he's more powerful, and he can do that where other Jedi can't. I don't know. You probably argue that. Well, I think I think it's another element. Like I think it's, and they don't necessarily have to explain this, but it doesn't really fall in line with some of the materials that we know of, at least today.
Right, and I think it's and we talked about a different material, a couple of weeks ago as well. But I think also you could say it's a blend. Could it be a little bit of Beskar? Because even when we saw Luke, slashing through them, there were a couple of times where his lightsaber kind of got stuck. Mm. Yeah, and so I don't know if he was just holding there, if it actually felt resistance or got stuck to it. So it could be some blend of material too, and maybe it's got Beskar elements in it, so it's stronger, but it's still not impenetrable.
Yeah, the other element from Legends was Frick, Phrik or YK, one of the two. But Frick was the other element that was kind of you couldn't cut through it with deflected blaster bolts. Now I don't remember if Frick was impenetrable when a lightsaber was put up against it. So maybe it's that. I don't know, but nonetheless, I love. Again, we talked about the fire. That was just a really cool shot of him being in flames and turning his head, looking at him that way.
Looks so evil.
He did. Look absolutely stunning.
It's way more real than anything Ghost Rider ever made.
Shots fired. No, that's a terrible movie. Whistling Birds. He got to fire that off. Didn't really have an impact, although it did look like it was at least stunning him or staggering him. It didn't look like it was penetrating, but that allowed him to pick up the spear and stick him in the neck there and really kind of rip his head off there, which I thought was a cool way for that guy to kind of die. But again, it was a cool little action scene. I was really worried there for a while about what was going to happen to Din. Like I was like, okay, is somebody going to bail this guy out? Because I really didn't think he was going to be able to take that thing one-on-one, especially when we saw at the very beginning, once that Dark Trooper hits him, his spear, you can see it in the bottom of the shot. It goes flying. I was like, oh, well, he's done. I don't know what he's going to be able to do, especially if this thing's Beskar. But I like that every character really did get something of a really cool scene in this. Everybody got to excel, even if they took a bit of a beating. You still got to see them really in action in a positive way too, and they didn't seem impenetrable for the most part, like we've seen in other times. I mean, still a bit heroic and everything, but a little bit better. Did you think that when he shot them out into space, that was the end of them?
I really did. I was like, oh well, that's par for the course.
I did too, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Like I was like, well, and I felt let down by it. I was like, well, that stinks. Like, okay, I guess it works, but
I mean, it really did. Like I felt like Phasma all over again. I was like, there's no way she's dead, right? And then like, no, Jim, she's dead. Yeah, just okay. I really did. I was really disappointed. I was like, I can't believe we did this again. So I was so happy when they did, and it makes total sense that they weren't gone.
Yeah,
They were just rounding up the troops and flying back in. So it's all good.
Getting into a formation of sorts.
That's right.
There's I still have a problem though with Din not taking any damage. Like he recovers from this just fine.
Yeah.
Well, maybe someday.
And even Bo later, like when Gideon's just bah, 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 and like really nothing.
Yeah, she just gets right back up. She fell down. I thought she was dead.
I thought so too. At least thought finally someone got hurt.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not in this one.
Did anybody get hurt this season? Period.
I don't know. We'll let the listeners, let our live listeners answer that question because they've got more time here than we do. Yep. There's when they were taking the bridge, we talked about Dank Ferrick and Son of a Mud Scuffer. Who was it? Someone said they're going to use that with their kids now, which I think is a great idea. Start throwing that at them. And they take the bridge pretty quick. I do wonder, like we did see Katie O'Brien's character. She's the communications officer that we've seen already in 3 or 4 episodes, but I kept looking and I didn't. And again, I've only seen it. Well, I say only, it's probably been about 6 times, but I don't remember seeing her character explicitly getting killed. So I'm wondering, like, did she die? And was she just, not important to show? Or is she on some other part of the ship and then she's hiding? Or did we see her show up? But
there were a couple.
It seems like they gave her a lot of screen time though, right?
Yeah, exactly. There were a couple in the back you can't really see. One of them definitely is not her, but the other one I can't quite make out. But I hope it's not her. I mean, I hope she did survive because I agree with you. They gave her enough screen time that, like, what's the point of doing that? So she could have gone somewhere else on the ship. But again, the bridge was really sparse by the time they got up there. So I'm not really sure where everybody went.
Yeah. I don't know either. Hopefully, maybe they'll, and I haven't seen anything from her. She's pretty vocal on Twitter. But I haven't seen her post anything about her character, although I haven't really looked too hard either. So I don't know. Maybe we'll find out her fate at some point. Let's talk about when the brig scene, because this is one of the scenes that I felt was a little slow. I don't know. It wasn't. It felt like it went on just a little too long. Like there was a lot of exposition here that we really didn't need. Maybe for the sake of people that don't know. And again, I haven't put too much thought into this, but I thought, well, maybe it's because there's a lot of background that they're providing here that may be useful to someone who maybe didn't see, Star Wars Rebels or watch the Clone Wars or know the history of Mandalorians and stuff. Because there was little bits and pieces that Gideon was providing here. But we know that, he knows, he says, assume I know everything. Now that line's important because it comes back a little bit later in a whack theory that I've got. But it felt like it was a very Thrawn-like character, which I think makes sense. If we assume that he does report up to Thrawn, maybe he's following his lead. He's learned from Thrawn in a lot of different ways. This all probably makes sense, but someone threw this idea out in Discord, and I don't hate it. I think I can poke holes in it, but the idea that maybe Moff Gideon is a Mandalore or was Mandalorian at some point, and why he knows about like the whistling birds and knows about the customs and all that. He may just have done his history. Thrawn probably knows all this as well because we know he studies history intently. But what do you think about that theory?
Yeah, I think if I looked at it more, I have to be consistent with what we talked about before. I think that he's a student of whatever is getting into, and he is going to do. I mean, he was with the ISB, so he has clearly a lot of research and things that he does. He has to go into every situation, know who they are, and clearly he knew who Din was and who Kara was and Grief, even though he had presumably never even seen them in person, and definitely was tracking them. But what else did you have? So I'm still going to go with that angle of it. I do like the idea though that there's a connection with someone like Thrawn, because I agree with you. I think this was filling a bit of that need, or a bit of that that situation that we saw in Rebels, where Thrawn was and we've seen this in the books too, where Thrawn's always a step ahead, always 2 steps ahead,
right,
and always thinks he has everything figured out. And when he doesn't, there's always this curious moment of,
yeah.
Even I have these moments where something unique can happen where part of that's planning though. You expect the unexpected in times and you're at least prepared for it. And so I took it a bit more like that, but I agree with you. This scene slowed things down just a touch. And the more I thought about it, I think that might have been okay, because otherwise you're at a really kind of a breakneck pace and you need something to slow it down just a touch. Now, the dialogue was a little off for me a little bit. And in the chat, they were talking, I think it's Dante again, Gideon loves his exposition. Just like every good villain, they need a monologue.
Oh, he was monologuing. Absolutely.
Right. And so it was, but you know, the whole, again, it's a bit cliche again, but again, the whole, I just want the child and you can keep the saber and whatever else. Where was Gideon going to go once if didn't have the kid? I mean, the whole thing just doesn't make sense why that bargain works unless you trade places and then you go, but they can just lock the whole ship down, presumably.
Yeah.
So, but that is what it is. And it really led us into a pretty cool fight scene though.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And part of the exposition was just explaining that whoever has the Darksaber is the ruler of Mandalore, which they pick up a little bit later in more depth and detail.
And Dim still cares not a drop about it.
Yeah. He says he doesn't care at all. I mean, he sincerely says that all he wants is the kid.
Right. And he still hasn't made all the connections with Bo at all either. And that she's, again, he just doesn't, he's singularly focused. And this is where it's it'll be more of a stark contrast with where you think the show is going with if he does take this more leadership type of role. Again, we see him resorting back to a bit of his own ways of being a bit more narrow in his focus rather than I need to, work as part of a bigger group and a big team.
Yeah. He starts playing the good guy role as well, right? He says, you can have the kid back. I already have what I need from it. Talking about the blood. He specifically says that he has rare properties that will restore order to the galaxy. When I hear that, the word order means things to me, but what did you pick up on anything there? Do you think he was kind of like, playing a word game there in terms of what order would essentially mean?
Yeah. I mean, it directly ties into first order and even final order, right? I mean, that's the first things that trigger for us. But again, we've heard this dialogue from, Palpatine and things like that everybody craves this, and we saw it with last week's episode when, they're going through and everybody, or when the officers, or what was his name? Anyway, Hess, right?
Yeah.
So you hear all of this, and this is what the Empire truly, truly believes. They just believe that they just want something stable. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how it treats them. They just want stability. They want to know what their life looks like day in and day out. They don't. And while people want that, it's not long term. People will accept that in times of really difficult moments or in war, whenever they're just tired of something.
Mm-hmm.
But then they get tired of that too. But they continue to miss the point on everything. But I didn't understand Gideon at all, because clearly they ran out of this stuff before. So why would he say he's already got what he needs from the kid? Because if he just needs his blood, well, if you run out of that again, you can go back to the well. Presumably, just like us, if you draw blood, your body just makes more, right?
Right.
If I remember biology right. So
yeah.
So I didn't really understand that line of thinking for him. And again, I'm sure he was just drawing him in so that he could, potentially end this threat and then go take back the bridge and, call it a day. Yeah.
There's excuse me, there's when you're talking about order, there was a moment, I think Dale said it too, like, he says, well, Gideon was starting to look like a good guy for a second. Not that I believed it, but it was convincing. I thought it was very convincing as well. I thought he was going to let him go. Honestly, I was like, okay, I guess this is where we're going. Really threw me off. And then he turns around and takes a, sucker punch at him with the Darksaber. And had Din not been wearing Beskar, he'd have been dead. Like, he hits him right on the back on the jetpack, which, didn't blow up, thankfully.
He's got a better model.
Yeah, he's got better than Boba's, that's for sure. Or any number of other Mandalorians that we've seen in all the other seasons of every other
jump troopers or anything else with a backpack.
Or anything else with a backpack or a jetpack. There's but yeah, so we get the fight. I thought it was pretty good. Where Mando and him going back and forth. We've got the cable being used and him cutting that through.
Finally, someone's intelligent with one of these fights.
Yeah, he finally gets a spear, and he whipped out the spear. I thought it was interesting that it looked like the spear was starting to heat up and potentially could break. So I think that's a good point. Like, Beskar is, it's impenetrable with slashes and that sort of thing, but pressed up against, like, over time, right?
Right.
Long-term exposure to something like a lightsaber or a Darksaber, eventually it's going to melt, which I think is what they were trying to show there, which I think is good. So they're not, it's a neat little twist and something that they didn't necessarily have to explore, but they did. And, we're all better for it, probably.
It was a great visual too.
So here's something, and this is kind of a weaker theory, or it's just more speculation on my part. He says earlier that assume I know everything, right?
Right.
Do you think do you think there's any chance that he threw this fight, that he rolled the dice, risked the Mandalorian killing him, and chancing this losing so that he would then have to take the Darksaber, or he knew that Bo Katan would now have to kill Din because he is now the rightful ruler of Mandalore because he bested Gideon in a fight. Do you think that's too far, or not?
Yeah, I think it's a step too far.
Okay, next question. No, I'm kidding.
If he could have won, he would have won, because then it's over, and then the rest of his plan can come back into fruition. He can just knock it out. Because he doesn't want to mess with these guys. This is my belief. I don't think Gideon really cares. These are these insignificant bugs that just keep coming back, and he wants to get rid of them. Why can't you just leave me alone? I'm just going to go on my Baby Yoda kick here, and I'm going to feed the Emperor. It's all going to be good. Call it a day. So I think he really did want to kill him, but it was a recognition when he lost. He was like, "This will be interesting if you're going to let me live." He's like, "I'm going to get to see what this looks like now," and he knew what was going to happen. And so I liked that moment where, okay, here's the consolation prize. This isn't so bad. This might be interesting. And now they might take each other out, and I'm going to have some sort of opening now. So what's that opening going to look like? And I really like that angle, but it was like plan B that he hadn't anticipated.
Mm. And I was just looking at the chat just now. It looks like there were other people, like Sherry says, he plotted the whole thing to cause a rift between Bo, and Dale said he did, in a sense. He knew Bo Katan would have to fight for the saber. So I don't know. It's I could see it both ways. I
got there in the end, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's just that line of assume I know everything. It seems pretentious, one, but then on top of that, it's like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, okay, and and Mando says the same thing. He's like, what's your point? I may be taking that out of context, but it's like, okay, you're going on about all this stuff. So I don't get it. What do you want here, kind of thing? And if that really was the case, and he did know, then yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was kind of an ultimate end game kind of thing for him. But all right, let's move on. We get to the bridge once again. And Bo Katan's just kind of standing there. I thought it was interesting that she was standing there and not like actively looking for Gideon. But it's probably just for story effect and dramatic effect, if you will. But they come in, and you can see Bo Katan's face immediately. Like, she's like mortified and like, what in the world is going on here? One, I was supposed to take him. Two, this dude's holding the Darksaber. It would have been different had he just, had it out or had it clipped on or something. But he's walking in with this thing. Like, I'm going to use this instead, right? I mean, he's got his spear, he's got his guns, but
I imagine this was a big moment for you. So what was your response when the door opens and he's there with the saber out?
Foreshadowing. I
thought you would have squealed or something.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's
juicy stuff, man.
Oh no, I can't get it because it's around the green screen, but I have my Darksaber already that I ordered. But it's like one of my favorite weapons. So to see it and to see Din carrying it, and even if it was just for a few seconds that he had it in his hand, I was like, it is so freaking cool, and I can't wait till we see more of that. See him with it, hopefully at some point. But again, that's just
what I kept saying. It's like Albert's going to flip. He's gonna freak.
I did. There was a lot of this episode that I kind of freaked out about.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so then we get this whole thing about she can't take the Darksaber because she didn't win it in combat.
We got to stop there.
All right. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Sabine.
Yeah.
Sabine. What about her? Sabine handed her the Darksaber.
Yes, she did.
Okay. So why is this a thing? I know Bo didn't want it, but she didn't want it. Wasn't because of the way that she wasn't going to earn it. She just didn't know that she was worthy of the Darksaber back in Rebels, if I recall.
Mm.
And so
she kind of felt that way, but yeah.
Yeah, but she accepted it, and this inconsistency bothers me a little bit, just because it's Filoni. First of all,
right?
He knows this, so there's got to be something else.
He wrote it.
Right. There's got to be something I'm missing here, and I'm just really struggling to figure out what it was I was missing, because clearly Sabine just handed her the Darksaber, say, "You're the rightful heir to this. You should be the one to yield it. You should be the one to lead Mandalore." Now, again, the pretender aspect of it, and some of those, that type of response and that feeling, especially if she's carrying the weight of failure with her, I can see where she might believe that she wasn't worthy then because she didn't acquire it the right way, and she led her people into a disaster and failed miserably.
Mm.
So therefore, that's about all I got. What do you got?
I got a lot. In fact, I have like 15 bullets on this.
Oh boy.
Okay, so stay with me here. All right. So here's how I rationalize this. And I think if you go back and watch the episode, your answer is in what Moff Gideon says. He says the Darksaber doesn't have power, the story does. And I don't think he's speaking about the story per se of the Darksaber itself, like the story that we got in Rebels and the tale of Vizsla and how he united all the clans. He's not talking about that story. He's talking about the story that we don't know yet. And there's a story here because so a couple things. Number one, we got to remember the Darksaber was not used to establish rule for a very long time. We don't know exactly how long, but at some point that was no longer used, and they went to this kind of imperial system, right, where they've got duchesses and princesses and that sort of thing. So you got suddenly Vizsla in the Clone Wars. Vizsla comes in and he wants to establish rule of law, right? He wants to go back to the old ways where whoever has this weapon that, my family's had for generations should be the rightful ruler of Mandalore. And it's always been in my heritage. It's been in my bloodline for so long that I should be that person. And so he pairs up with Darth Maul. They end up taking over, and Maul wants to do this, right? He wants to help them for his own purposes, right? He doesn't give a crap about Mandalore. He doesn't care about their cause or any of that stuff. He just knows that he's got one end game thing in mind, and that's revenge on Kenobi. And so he's utilizing and taking advantage of the Mandalorians from that regard. He ends up besting Vizsla and killing him, chopping his head off, and acquires the Darksaber. But he's not claiming to be he never explicitly claims to be the ruler of Mandalore.
Right.
And so, so I'm just giving the context and providing that for anybody that hasn't really read up on this or understand where we got. Okay. Right. So then Maul has the Darksaber and he just literally puts it away like it's just some kind of collector's item, right? He doesn't care about it. He's not wielding it in any way. He's not even using it. Fast forward to Star Wars Rebels. He's trying to seduce Ezra. He's trying to get him to come on to his side. He wants to take him on as apprentice. And he entices him by giving him and handing them this powerful weapon called the Darksaber, right? So it's at that point that, once Ezra learns the history of it, he's like, well, this isn't really mine. It's not really a Jedi weapon. This is a Mandalorian weapon. Here, Sabine, you take this, okay? Sabine then now has it. And she kind of starts having doubts. I will agree with you on that. She has doubts about whether or not she's a rightful ruler or whether or not she should wield it. But we fast forward to the point at the very end where, at least the last time we see Bo Katan before the last time we see Bo Katan, where she hands her the Darksaber and Bo Katan just accepts it. And you've got all the heads of the Mandalorian clans, at least the major Mandalorian clans, coming together and accepting that she is now the rightful ruler. I think this happens for a couple reasons. Number one, they don't have anybody technically they don't have a ruler at this point, right? They've already been scattered. Satine is dead. She's been killed. And suddenly you've got this Darksaber. They're like, okay, fine. She's probably she was going to be the rightful heir to the throne anyways, if we kept going with the ways that we had been. Now that she has the Darksaber, it probably just makes sense that we allow her to have it. But I think the story, and here we're finally getting to the part here, I think the story that Gideon's talking about is what happened after that. I have a suspicion that most of the clans, even though the heads were okay with it, or we saw at least 6 different clans that were represented saying that we accept that she is the rightful ruler. I don't think they ever, if you know the Mandalorian history, I don't think everybody was on board with that. And I think it led to what these things always lead to in Mandalore history, which is now civil war and civil unrest. And I think people got upset. I think they were really mad that she was now in charge and, when she technically shouldn't have been at this point, or there was never, not everyone had a say. There were probably people saying, look, there needs to be a fight. Everyone should have a chance at claiming the Darksaber again and establishing this, going back to the old ways of the Darksaber being who, dictates who rules Mandalore. So I think all of that happened. And I think Bo Katan ultimately was the one that said, okay, how that settled, I don't know, but I have a feeling she was the one that said, okay, from now on, it has to be, like she declared, it has to be one in combat. And I think her on that, when she looked as uncomfortable as she did on the bridge, I think it was because she was having to eat her words. And I think Gideon knew that. He was saying she knows that she can't just hand it over that way.
Right.
So that's my story.
Well, and I can see if Gideon bested her to get it in the first place, and then someone else beat Gideon and then just gave it back to her, I could see where that would cause a lot of problems. You are a pretender in that you lost it to him, but somebody else recovered it for you.
Yeah.
That's no, that's not a leader. That's a coward,
right?
Or something to that effect, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that makes some sense to me as well.
There's the situation in which Bo Katan acquires the Darksaber is so like it's outside of what I think they were really thinking would ever happen, right? I don't think they ever accounted for this scenario. It's a very unique scenario with a lot of very unique circumstances that led to it. And it's a very coveted item because it's an artifact. It's what they've always for centuries, thousands of years were ruled by, and suddenly it's come back and someone was just handed it over to them. And even though a couple of people were okay with it, I don't think everybody else was. So the rest of that story now is you've got the Mandalorians weakened. They're at civil war. Again, this is all headcanon, so this is Albert's head right here. They're weakened. They're fighting amongst each other. And then here comes the Empire, right? They're coming in. They're taking advantage of the fact that they're down. If there's any one group at this point that they could probably feel threatened by is the idea that the Mandalorians are now going to unite and that Mandalore is coming back. If I was the Empire, I'd be like, no. I'm stopping this before this gets out of hand because that's one force we don't want to screw with. And so they're going to jump in and put an end to it. And I think that's what started the purge and kind of led to where we are at this point. So I don't know how you guys feel about all that, but that's where I'm at. And we'll see how that all plays out later.
So did you, before we leave that topic though, so the conflict that she had when they walk in, was it purely because A, she was robbed of the opportunity, B, that Din had it, or was there a conflict now with her that she really didn't want to have to fight Din in order to acquire this? Do you think there was any of that she was really upset that they were going to have to battle it out in order for her to do this the right way?
Yeah.
Or was it purely that she didn't get the crack at it to do it?
No, I think it's both. I hate to cop out, but I think it is. No, it probably is both, honestly. And I think that's why it was weighing on her. I mean, you could see it visually on her face. I think Katie Sackhoff did a great job of visually showing the struggle that she had with just accepting it. Because I mean, Din was like, "Fine, I yield. I yield. Take it. I don't care. It's not my weapon." She's like, "I can't." And again, it's the story. It's not the weapon. It's the story and what happened. And hopefully, well, I think we will. I think we'll get to know more about what really truly happens and not just headcanon here. Hopefully, in season 3.
And the last time we saw them together, there was a lot of respect going back and forth. This is the way, and what you did here won't be forgotten. It'll be remembered. So yeah, a very difficult situation now for her to be in. Yeah,
there's one other interesting aspect of this whole dialogue, and if you think about it, you've got a role reversal in some ways, right? You've got Bo Katan earlier in this season talking to Din about his old ways and the customs and really kind of challenging those, right? And now you've got the reverse. You've got somebody like Din who's like, what do you mean you can't just take it? Who cares about the bylaws or the rules? Just take the stinking weapon, right? And it's the same thing that's happening here. And it goes back to that question it goes back to what what's his name said in the last episode, where about, once, we all change the rules, right? When stakes are high kind of thing. Right. And so you're seeing this happen, right? You're seeing, I think, and I love it. It seems like it is a theme that is traversing a lot of the characters, specifically around the Mandalorians, but it is traversing about what does it mean to be a Mandalorian? We keep coming back to this theme again. What does it mean? What do the old ways mean versus the new ways? And can you adjust? And I think what they're ultimately going to lead to is that, like we said in the last episode, you've got to change your ways. You've got to evolve. You can't be stuck in the same, even though it may have worked for thousands of years. The galaxy's a totally different place now. And unless things change for you, you're going to continue to fight. Mandalore's never going to come back together because you guys can't agree on anything. And I think it's somebody like Din or maybe Bo Katan or somebody else that's going to finally bring them all together and restore Mandalore, which I think is going to be problematic when we get to the sequel trilogy, but that's a whole nother discussion.
I agree, but it still seems like the Darksaber is the one way to do that.
Yeah.
At least from a symbolic
aspect. Right. Yeah. So thank you everybody that's still with us and still chiming in on anytime we can't remember the name. Bill Barr. This is the actor.
Burr, yeah.
Bill Burr, yeah, sorry. I said Barr last time. Bill Burr. Yeah, these guys are like waiting for us to say, what's the name of and then type it in. So thank you guys for that.
Perfect.
Okay, so we get the return of the Dark Troopers. They board, they make their way over to the bridge. They stop along the way at different posts just to ensure that We have a really good battle for Luke Skywalker a little bit later, which that's fine. I get it. I understand why they did it. We get the Rock'em Sock'em robots once again up at the door. They're sitting there pounding the door open. And then Gideon he's right. I mean, if they make it through that door, the only two people are surviving. I really don't think there's a chance that any of those guys would have survived outside of Gideon and Grogu. Do you agree, or do you think they would have been able to
take a couple out? It would have been interesting if Grogu would have gotten involved. Grogu has the ability to help them, but I mean, not a whole platoon.
Yeah,
they'll just wear them down at some point. You just can't keep up with that. I mean, we saw it with Din and with the pirates last week. You know, there's a limit to what you can actually do on your own, and there's only a handful of them.
Yep. Okay, so I call this next section "Return of the Jedi" because essentially that's what exactly it was. But Grogu senses something. We start seeing more of him in the shots, and him, focusing on the cameras because he knows something's coming up. The droids stop, and I had the question of why, and I just assumed that they realized that there was something in the back, and so they wanted to wait and hold their posts. Or any thoughts why the droids just stopped, though? Outside of it made again for a good looking battle later.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll put the hats on. So they're probably in tune with the ship security system, I guess. So when they had an unidentified aircraft coming in and porting, they probably had a theory. But yeah, it still doesn't make sense why not all of them need to turn around. They could have still pounded on the door, finished their task there, while the other ones, because they're droids. They don't have a thought process, I guess, on this one. They're not sentient, but yeah, that's about the best I can come up with.
Okay, no, that's fine. I gotta say, man, when they show there's something about the sound of an X-wing. There's something about the shot itself, the way he followed it, and we could see it kind of traversing across the screen, across multiple windows.
And the slow landing
coming in, that was great. It was just he was building up the suspense.
Was there any music? I don't think there was any music.
In that first shot, I don't think there was. If it was really ambient and light.
Yeah.
But then as soon as we see him for the first time from the back and just the cloak walking forward, there's definitely music played in there.
Right. Yep.
But I want to ask you this question. I said that I didn't want it to be Luke Skywalker, and I'll expand on that a little bit later in terms of how I'm feeling now. But I want to ask just a quick question. Like, when did you know it was Luke Skywalker? And don't tell him about what I was, because I was texting you like the day of, like, did you watch the episode? He's like, no, I haven't seen it yet. I'm like, okay. And I didn't know what to say because I didn't want to ruin anything. And then I stopped texting you altogether when you said, did Luke Skywalker show up? And I was like, okay, well, I'm out. I'm not going to say yes or no. And then I thought, well, that's probably incriminating myself. But anyways, the question is,
I started getting this feeling throughout the day where I was like, because there was this, you could feel the buzz. And I was trying to avoid everything to figure out, so I didn't get spoiled on it because I wasn't going to watch it till that evening. But there was this buzz going on. And I was like, oh crap, something big has happened. It's got to be Luke. Like Luke's showing up. They found a way to make this happen. And so my mind started racing. And I still, when they got to this moment where you were like, all hope had been completely lost, I was sold completely it was going to be Luke Skywalker, because really, who else was it going to be?
Exactly.
I mean, Ahsoka would have been cool with Sabine, maybe. That would have been neat. But aside from a really powerful Jedi Master, who was going to take out, 30 of these super droids or anything like that, and just completely make short work of them. And
yeah.
So it just made a lot of sense. And then I was like this the whole time. Like when Luke came up, my hands were on my head. I was just in like disbelief that Luke Skywalker was on my screen and at the end of 2020, and this was going to be a thing. And then when the lightsaber was out, and again, there was no sound for the first couple shots, the first couple screens of him slicing through droids. And it was like, all right, it's got to be him. But are we going to have to watch all this through a TV screen?
Right.
Because I was panicked. I was like, no, please don't do that. Yeah.
I kind of
liked that aspect of it too, where I was still just arm length away. Like, you're still not going to be able to see it. But of course, at some point you were going to get it. But I was freaking out. I got to be honest. I was freaking out. And after the show was over, Steph was asking me why, kind of what it meant. I was like, for people like you and for me and for Mike, people of our generation who grew up with this stuff, you never, it was the same when Luke was in the movies, in the sequel trilogy.
Mhm.
It was something we weren't sure we would ever see.
Yeah.
And why would you have any expectation that a post Return of the Jedi, like still in your prime, Luke Skywalker was going to be on screen in a show about a Mandalorian coming into it, last year? Why would you have any expectation of that? And why would you, things that you just don't even think are possible? So when I hear some of the comments about maybe what Luke looked like, and so, or maybe even some of the scenes, I've seen some complaints, but I'm like, man, this is not something we expected to ever see. And I was just I didn't know I'd have this reaction. I was really shocked I was going to have this reaction to this. I didn't think it was going to be that impactful to me. And I couldn't get words out. I paced around my apartment just with my hands on my head, just saying, more or less, I just can't. I was just in total shock of what just happened. And then the freaking end scene, I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and die. It might be all right.
Yeah, he was sending me text messages that said WTF, only it was spelled out, I think, the entire time.
Well, I like to do like message after message, spelling it out for special emphasis.
Yeah. My phone was blowing up
frick?
There. There's
What about you? What did that mean for you seeing that first time coming on screen?
So, okay. It was conflicting. Because in my heart, like you said, I never thought I would see Luke Skywalker again. I had already put that to bed with The Last Jedi came out, and he was dead. I'm like, okay, well, I'll never get that again. I'll hopefully, the best I'm going to get is I'll be able to read about it, right? Or it'll be a comic book, and I got some of that. Like that's why I was so excited with The Rise of Kylo Ren, because we got to see him in that comic book in his prime, and we got to see Ben Solo as well fighting alongside him, although he was kind of running around just as a kid. But that was the closest we gotten. I was really happy with that, right? I don't think people understand that. Even though we may be some people may be conflicted with whether or not Luke was there, whether this was fan service, whether this flies in the face of The Last Jedi or the sequel trilogy, right? Put all that aside. Think about the people that have been wanting to see Luke Skywalker ever since Return of the Jedi, because even at that moment, like it was just a small smidgen of what we knew Luke had in terms of potential that we actually saw on screen, right? You think about Return of the Jedi, and yeah, he had his moments, but he didn't have as many moments as maybe like an Anakin Skywalker. We didn't have the Clone Wars. We didn't have Star Wars Rebels, where you get to see every week after week the character that we love and want and aspire to be as young children go in and fight like this all the time. And so to be able to see him on screen, right? If I put all that to the side, put all my personal thoughts around, put my podcaster hat away and just go back to, 10-year-old Albert, it was just pure joy, right? Seeing him on screen again for the first time in a long time. Again, to your set, like I said, I keep saying it, or I'll say it again. I just did not think I would see that happen on screen. And I'm happy that they went there and they did that. And I think this means something significant for where we're going to go with Star Wars, which I'm really excited about. I will say that when the TIE fighter, when the X-Wing came across the screen, I was like, okay, that's not Luke Skywalker. There's no way. Like, there's not many X-Wings that would just come in. And Kara says, oh, great, one X-Wing, or we're saved, or something like that, right?
But that's when you had to know what it was. Cause why would one? You're right. It was probably Dave Filoni showing up to kill all the droids with his bad acting.
Yeah, right. And then when they showed the first camera angle, where we see it kind of coming in, and there's an R2 unit in the back, and I'm like, oh, that can't be. They've got to be screwing with us. This is all a guys, right? It's not real. There's no way they're bringing Luke Skywalker. Then you see
are you kidding me? Over.
Then you see the cloaked figure in the background walking to that first camera shot, still black and white cameras, which really, guys, you have lightsabers, you can't do color. Right? But anyway, whatever. When you see that shot, I was still in denial. The very next shot that they show him is him with his right hand out and the glove and the green lightsaber. And that was it. I was like, okay, it's Luke Skywalker. I mean, it can't be anybody else. And if it was anybody else, that would have been just murder on the fans, because that is so iconic, that look itself, right? The glove and that. And as it went on, Reed was giving you more and more. You got to see the belt buckle, right? You got to see that. You could even see his black outfit underneath as well.
You got a little bit of a glimpse of his face through one of the monitors. You can actually tell it looks like Luke,
right? But you feel it's a male, at least at that point. If you're not buying into it being Luke Skywalker.
And he was, when he walked by the screen with the green, I mean, you could see the hilt was clearly what he had in Jedi, and it was there. But I was kind of with you. I was like, okay, well, they've left themselves an out because we're seeing the fighting on TV. It's not super clear. We don't know what color the lightsaber is. There's still a chance this isn't what it's supposed to be. And then, yeah, we'll just put all that to rest. What I liked about this, though, if you look at the way some of the way he was fighting with the lightsaber and deflecting laser bolts, and even when he walked with the saber out to the right, there were a lot of Anakin-esque
Anakin Skywalker,
moments.
yeah.
There were a lot of Anakin-esque moments in some of this, in that heyday of the Republic, but specifically a bit of that flair that we had from Anakin in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And I thought that was a really great, tie between the two to show, again, more of that flourished ability, that polish, and that, even if you want to call it a little bit of swagger to it, I thought it was really great to see that back in a Jedi. And then we get the converse of that too, with his very soft demeanor that we get when he's there and speaking with them. And so we kind of get that both angle. Of course, we have a little bit of a moment with the last trooper he disposes of. But yeah, as soon as we saw the green, the green, the fan
result the green. No, that finally paid off after years and years. There's the tunnel scene. We probably should talk about that. I mean, I thought it was great. I've seen, if you haven't had a chance, go out there. It's all over social media. We haven't posted anything ourselves just because everyone's already done it. But they've shown, Darth Vader in Rogue One in the tunnel, and then Luke Skywalker in his tunnel with the last I don't know, it's like 8-10 dark troopers that he slices through there. You've got the red, you've got the green. They're both in smoke. They've got their moments. I mean, that's called a death tunnel or death box or whatever you want to call it, kill box. But yeah, I thought that was great. I mean, it kind of culminated, and then, like you said, it ends with him crushing something, which is very dark. What do you call it? Not Dark Empire. I'm thinking of the video game now.
Force Unleashed.
Force Unleashed. Thank you. That was a move that we'd seen many times before in Dark Empire. We saw Luke Skywalker kind of take down an AT-AT, and just seeing him do that was, again, it's probably fan service, but there's a reason for this. And I don't want to keep teasing it because I do want to come back to it. But there is a reason why all of this makes sense and why they're doing it, and it's not just because they want to make people happy that necessarily didn't like the sequel trilogy or didn't like Rise of Skywalker or didn't like Last Jedi. There's deeper meaning and deeper thought here that's happening, at least from my perspective. Okay. There was and to my mind, this is the title of the show, right? The rescue. I mean, I think we think about it can be both things. I'm not saying it can't, but I think really the rescue isn't so much Din going to rescue the child and Grogu. Right. It's Luke Skywalker. That's what they're talking about. The rescue is, in my opinion, is Luke Skywalker coming in because they were gone. They were dead. And had he not shown up, had not the Great Hope shown up, things would have gone very differently for them. So this was the rescue at that point.
Absolutely.
Let's get into the goodbye, because this was a really, really significant moment, in my opinion. It was very touching. It was very sincere. It was probably one of the more, if not one of the most touching moments we've had in Star Wars. Like, I think about the I love you too, or I know moment in Empire. That one's up there for me. This one is kind of like right up there. I'm not gonna say it's above that, because I like Han and Leia a lot, and I like what they were doing there. But it was a very a poignant moment. I know a lot of people, it brought tears to a lot of people's eyes, and I don't think people were expecting it. And I think that speaks to the relationship that not only Pedro Pascal was able to convey on screen with this CGI/puppet thing, but also the writing that Favreau put in all these moments that we've been talking about over the course of the last 2 seasons finally kind of all paid off, and you got that emotional weight, which I think we really needed, because I don't think anybody wanted, with the exception of Mike Rondo, I don't think anybody wanted the child to leave at this point.
Right. And I liked that we built up to it too. So when Luke is still, murdering through everything, we have Grogu touching the screen and turning back and looking at Din as well. So we're already starting to get this. And when the X-Wing comes, we see Grogu, perk up just a little bit. So we're already feeling this connection between them. And that tension is already starting to build for us. So whenever we actually get to that moment and we see him peering around the chair and that uncertainty and Luke sharing with Din that he's looking for your permission, you guys have this bond, right? And we finally feel it. And the fact that he removed his helmet for him, I think was an incredible moment. And seeing him actually tear up was a bit, I guess it was a little bit surprising. You don't expect that from a, macho kind of Mandalorian type of thing, but it was It was very powerful. It was very good. I was very surprised that they pulled it off as well as they did, because it was super cute at the same time. I mean, he puts him on the ground and then he's wrapped around his leg, just like a child at daycare, right?
Yeah.
So it was very cute that, he had to go down and kind of talk to him, and it had, a little bit reminiscent of, Phantom Menace when Anakin's leaving Shmi, and that scene of, you need to go, they're your people, and of course R2D2's there to convince everybody. That's all it takes is a cute droid.
I laughed at, and I didn't mean to laugh. Like the tension was broke when he goes, "Are you a Jedi?" I'm like, really, dude? You're gonna ask that question? Like he just took down all these dark troopers. But I don't think that line was meant to be funny. But I laugh every single time I hear it.
Well, it speaks to his inexperience.
I was gonna say, it's inexperience, it's innocence, ignorance to some extent. He just doesn't know. I get it, but as viewers, we're like, yeah, dude, that's Luke Skywalker. How do you not know the legend of Luke Skywalker at this point? He says, "Come, little one," and which reminded me, like it's like a play on "Come here, little one" when Kenobi says that to R2D2 in Part 4, right? That was kind of similar there. You said Grogu tells him that he needs Din's permission before he leaves. And then this line here between Luke. So Luke says, and he didn't say much, and I get it why he didn't say much. I mean, it's just money that they've got to spend. They've got to get through it, make sure it's not too awkward looking, make sure it doesn't pull you out of the scene too much, which it pulled me out a little bit to the CGI. I'm not complaining about it. Okay. I'm not one of these people that's ragging on it. I loved it. I thought it was effective and it did what it needed to do. But it did pull me out of the scene just a little bit. Again, that's just my personal opinion, but the line he does say is, he is strong with the Force, but talent without training is nothing. I will give my life to protect the child. How do you know it's called John? But he will not be safe until he masters his abilities. And I think what Luke's talking about here, and I want your thoughts, but I think he's talking about the dark side. He's saying that I can, the protection from other people, that's the easy part. I can do that. Don't worry about that. But unless he gets training, the real danger here is himself. And in his inability to control and be consumed by the dark side and the power that it wields. And I think that's why Luke Skywalker, probably more than anyone else, heard this call, because he does not want this to get out of hand, right? He does not want another a Force user turning to the dark side and somebody as strong and as powerful as him being the child. He wants to nip that in the bud as quickly as possible. But any thoughts around, I guess, his comments? And I guess I got one of your thoughts on, did any of the CGI pull you out?
Well, first, when he reached out his hand, actually, it reminded me of Kylo Ren, actually, a little bit with Rey offering his hand. It stoked some of that. I think he could feel Din's trepidation about it. He could feel his uncertainty. And of course, he's already feeling this connection with the child and curious what they felt from the Seeing Stone. But it was good that he felt the nervousness for Din about what he was worried about. And I'm with you entirely. Luke has seen this with Anakin's story. He's seen it with his own story. The biggest thing you have to overcome is fear of your own path and what you're willing to lose and what you have connected to. And the Grogu's connection with Din becomes a problem at some point, most likely.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you and I have talked a lot about this extensively over the last few years, where we've, having an emotional attachment or connection with someone isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you're capable of, and you're experimenting and you have a really strong, bond, it's not only a connection now, it's a bond.
Yeah.
Like Anakin had to Padme, then it will be very difficult, and Luke had with his friends, be very difficult for you not to start making concessions and sacrifice the things that you know are right and wrong in the name of protection, in the name of doing what's right for your people and that kind of thing. And so I think it was very important for him to say these things. And I agree with you. It's easier to protect you from the outside forces, presumably right now, especially because the galaxy is a bit quieter than what we've had in previous years. But now we have this being. There's so many questions about where they go from here, but now we have this being now the CGI though. So the first time I saw it, yeah, it was a little off. It was the mouth movements typically.
Right.
Some of just the enunciation wasn't quite there. But when I watched it, I watched it a second and a third time, and I had less problems with it each one of those moments. And
yeah, I would say the same thing.
Because even the audio just seemed abrupt, like almost they were splicing some dialogue and things like that. And actually, I'm curious. I think R2 may have been CGI too. I'm pretty sure R2 was CGI. But it was just the movie was on. But you know what? When I watched that second and third time, I found I wasn't even paying attention. Like I was just in the moment more, and I didn't really focus on the CGI at all. And it worked better for me in that moment where I wasn't trying to analyze everything on that first one, just take all this stuff in. And yeah, his face is a little rounder and the lips don't move quite much. The eyes were a little off-putting at times. You can go and critique all the things.
Right.
We did this with Tarkin too, right? And I thought Tarkin, and they use different methodologies for doing these things, but Tarkin worked. The mouth movements were difficult, right? And a completely different way of doing this, but it still got the point across. It still worked for what they needed to accomplish. And for this, what else were you wanting for a recast? I mean, if we're going to do this, are we going to do a recast, or are we just going to see what's the best we can do to make this actually look like Mark Hamill 5 years after Return of the Jedi?
Yeah.
And I think from what they were trying to accomplish, it worked, and the moment worked, and what they wanted the scene to look like, it kept hitting all the right marks, and I get it. The visual part is go, and the sound, everything fits together for us with Star Wars.
Yep.
But this was something where I think everything else was working so well that you don't need to nitpick some of that stuff to get the enjoyment and get the meaning out of it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. As soon as by the second and third viewing, I don't notice it anymore. And I think you and I, unfortunately, go into anything Star Wars for the first time very critical, very analytical. We're dissecting things, and you can't. And we've talked about this before, like with the movies, right? I don't ever enjoy the movie the first time I see it because I'm too busy taking notes and thinking about what I'm going to talk about and what do I want to analyze. And it's not until the second, third viewing that I can just sit there and this sounds like horrible, like, oh my God, poor me. But it feels like it is until like the third, fourth viewing that we can just sit down and appreciate the story for what it is and kind of really get lost and caught up in the moments. And I found as I was with subsequent viewings, I was getting there, and I would say that, yeah, it's, again, like I said, it's effective. It tells a story. It's really not a big deal. And I hate the fact that people are harping on it as much as they would. I would like to see Lucasfilm adopt something like deepfake technology. Go buy that technology or come up with your own or do something, because there's already been a video that's been put out where they just use deepfake versus CGI, and it looks better. Honestly, I'll just say it. It does. It looks a lot better. So it feels like they could do something there, but I'm not going to knock ILM. They're the best at what they do, right? So,
right. And again, we're still on a TV show budget, and this was a very high budget episode, and we've seen a couple of lower budget episodes. I mean, when we look at the overall cost of doing all of this, we have to figure this. And I know this is taking us kind of out of the moment with what we're looking at story wise, but I think it's just one of those things. We have to be realistic about it. This is a smaller scale. I think for what they did, they still accomplished way more than what we would typically see. Yeah. And we've had these moments too, where there's some CGI, some like the speeder bikes in particular has been a bit of an issue for me. And, where they just don't quite look quite right. But do you still live in that world? Has it really removed you that far from it that's a problem? And I don't think that's the case. And when I watched it the second, third time, you start to pick up on a little more subtle movements that they did with the face, little twitches at the mouth or in the eye, and things like that, where those things matter. Those are the little things that if you can get those right, you still get that convincing quality to it that doesn't pull you completely out of it to where you're just staring at, like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
It doesn't even look like anything, but those little things help make it more real, even though you could clearly know it's not.
There's at this point to kind of go back to the story here. Right. He says, Mando says, didn't want to let him go. He says, I'll see you again, I promise. He is. I mean, I have no doubt that he's going to see him again. I mean, they're just foreshadowing this, and what that looks like will probably be a little bit later, but he is coming back.
If they say it, you got to believe it, right?
Exactly. Especially with Dave Filoni. Yeah, I mean, Filoni will, like I said, he's brought back so many things, and things that you think have been just laid to rest and never will surface again. They do. They may not be immediate, but they do come back up. So, and this is one of those lines that for sure will. We get the music. And especially in this moment here, is just perfect. I mean, in every possible way. There's such a level of like sensitivity here, I don't know. It's just perfect in what's going on. But he takes the helmet off, and which I wasn't expecting, to be honest. Like, I didn't think he would do this. Right. Especially given who's there, right? He's got all these people behind him that have been giving a crap about the helmet already. You've got somebody like Cara Dune who's never seen his face, and he's taking the helmet off, and just that moment of when Grogu's touching his face and they're looking at each other. Although it's not the same parallel by any means, but it is, I think there's something to say about this scene with Return of the Jedi when Vader says, "I want to take the helmet off because I want to see with my own eyes." And I think that's really what it's doing. Like he wants Grogu to be able to see his face, to be able to see his eyes, to see that this isn't an easy decision for him, that he is hurting, but that he knows that he wants Grogu to know that this really is the best thing and he really is okay with it, even though he may not emotionally be okay with it. And I think that was enough at that point that Grogu was like, okay, I got it. I understand what you want. And, drops down and heads over to Uncle Luke at that point. But what do you think about that scene?
I mean, he still had a little bit of nervousness because he clung to his leg, but yeah, I agree. It was really powerful. I mean, you want to make that connection. I think it was, if Din was going to be vulnerable to anybody, and I think you've really followed his and kind of articulated his journey throughout the last couple of seasons really well over the last many months. We've done this. I think if there was anybody, he wasn't going to do it for anybody. He wouldn't even entertain it, and it was a complete non-starter, and it was grounds for fighting, right? But for him to willingly do this, want to do it, know that Grogu, was reaching out, kind of wanting to see this and show him who he really is, I think was just a testament to, like you said, how strongly he felt for Grogu and the bond that they have in general. And I agree with you. It was also this moment of saying, you're going to be all right. Yeah. This is the right thing for you. I strongly believe it. Yeah, it's going to, it's going to be tough, but we'll see each other again. And again, there were some parallels here with Phantom Menace, of course, but it was good to see. I think we needed to see his face, and you're right. Everybody else be damned. This is what I need with effectively my child, right? Yeah. So I think we finally kind of got your validation of, this really is his kid.
Yeah, it's a father-son relationship or a parent and child relationship. Mm-hmm. I love that his last words to Grogu were, "Don't be afraid." Right. Like it's like very Anakin and kind of what you said earlier, where the one thing that we know, and Luke tells us this in The Rise of Skywalker, that the biggest thing that Jedi do is overcome their fear. That's like, that's essential here. So, certainly significant that, he's not even a Jedi, but he knows that is going to be the biggest thing that he needs to overcome, is just not to be afraid. So, we got R2 show up, which is really unexpected. I didn't think we'd see him. Although we saw him on the X-Wing, I didn't think he'd come into the shot.
Yeah, we never saw him trailing behind.
Yeah, I know.
For once, he didn't have to save the day.
Right. He didn't come in and save the day this time. He's done it many times before. But it sounded like they were having an exchange there. A lot of people have speculated as to what it could be. He might have been saying everything from, "Hey, this guy looks like Yoda," or, "Hey, I remember this kid from the temple," or back on Coruscant, because R2-D2 would have been around at some point with Anakin and Padme, and maybe they did run into Grogu. We don't know, but there was a lot being said there. There was, if you listen to the audio, descriptive audio, and look at the subtitles, there's really nothing there that kind of gives anything away, but it seemed like it lingered on for a little bit longer than it probably should have. But any speculation, thoughts as to what was happening there?
Oh, absolutely. He's like, "Oh no, not another one. What is he going to steal from me this time?" He was having PTSD with Yoda in Empire, and this creature is going to steal all the cool stuff from the satchel, and he's going to have to get beaten with a stick again.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Take to the bank on that one.
Okay, so just kind of wrap it up before we get into the cutscene and their post scene and the final thoughts here. Their last words from Luke Skywalker: "May the Force be with you." Shocker. Saw that one coming. And then Din he looks completely devastated. I mean, he's tearing up. There was one moment in there where he actually was about to smile. It looks like he got just a slight smirk in, and then, went back to his stoic self. Right. But he looks completely devastated. Cara, they cut over to her, and she looks pretty excited. Like she looks content. She looks happy for what's happening. Is probably a better word there for her. And then it kind of ends there with that door closing, the music or the music ending, and we got to fade to black. Yeah, I was hoping there would be more. And I will say this, as I was watching the episode, I kept looking at the time. The entire time, the first time, I kept watching the clock, because I heard it was like 46 minutes long. And at this point, we're only at like 30 something minutes. I'm like, what in the world? There's no way we have 12 minutes of credits. So I fast forward. I was like, okay, there's got to be something at the end. There's just no way. And of course, we got that end scene. But again, part of what took me out of this episode was me constantly watching the clock. And I was hoping that end credit scene would be some extension of this, but it wasn't. And in fact, I will say this, like when they showed, the first thing they show is the suns. And I was like, oh man, we're back on Tatooine.
We couldn't let well enough alone, could we?
We've talked about this so much, about how much time we've spent on Tatooine. But here we are. We're back on Tatooine. Boba and Fennec show up. What used to be Jabba's palace at this point, and we now know it's, I guess, Bib Fortuna's palace, which I can't remember. There were actually people that survived Jabba's sail barge in Legends. And I know people are like, they all died. No, they actually didn't all die. There was a lot of people that had stories that lingered in the novels, but I can't remember if Bib Fortuna was. I want to say he was one of the people that did survive. So it wasn't new, but I could be wrong there. Do you remember? I
believe he survived in the EU, yeah.
Okay, so they kind of pulled from that. But it was the same kind of thing where he kind of stepped in at this point. And to go back to, we got to remember also, if we go back to like Bloodline and the Aftermath trilogy, after the Empire fell, it left this big void. We've talked about this probably a lot at this point, but there was a big void that was put in place because the Hutts fell out of power. And so now you've got all these different smaller pirates, scoundrels, whatever, thugs stepping in, trying to take over and take this power. And so somebody like Bib Fortuna, who's kind of an opportunist, makes sense that he would step in, overeat to the point where he's kind of chubby now. I didn't like the McClunky line. I still don't. I don't know why they threw it in there.
I had to rewind. I was like, no way. Yeah. They're going to do this.
So Bib yells, McClunky. I think it's him that yells it. It looks like it's his mouth that's moving.
It was him, yeah.
Which we know translates into "this will be the end of you." Which, okay, whatever. It's just it's a Easter egg more than anything. I'm not going to dig too much into it. But
then it comes jab. It was a little subtle jab for fun.
Yeah,
just funsies.
So Fennec kills Fortuna's henchman. She releases the female dancer prisoner, which I thought was kind of cool, and she kind of gives the nod, like "get out of here, kid," kind of thing. And then Boba walks in, and then we get the music, which, man, that music is awesome. Like, I really can't wait to hear that when we get to the Book of Boba series, just as the intro, I think would be great. But, he kills Bib Fortuna, so there's no more Tawana Wanga. So sorry about that if anybody's a big Bib Fortuna fan.
Hey, he didn't waste any time either. He just was like,
yep, boom.
Yeah.
Takes him out. We get Conan the Barbarian. The next scene, I want to call him that, Bonan the Barbarian. But yeah, he goes and sits down on the throne, which is, again, a little gratuitous in terms of what they were doing, but I liked it. I like what they were doing here. And then we get the final thing saying that the Book of Boba Fett will be coming in December of 2021. So I guess give me your thoughts on this little Marvel U-esque scene. It's the first time that we've done this. I think it certainly plays into what they're trying to accomplish on probably a smaller scale. That's probably arguable, but certainly what they're trying to accomplish with Disney Plus and interconnecting a lot of these TV shows. This is now the fourth show, I think, at this point, that'll be kind of all woven together. But what did you think about this end credit scene? And what do you think about the prospects of a show like the Book of Boba Fett?
Right, completely unexpected. We've never had this in Star Wars. We definitely didn't expect it on this show. It makes sense though. We had the very kind of a neat and tidy wrap up at the end of the season, and it really felt. I don't know. It was satisfying the way that story ended, but it also was like, okay, we really don't have any idea what's coming next. We have a little bit of an idea, but really it's this final. So to get something extra on top of it was completely unexpected and quite honestly, wonderful and perfect. And the way that they handled it, and Boba's just, take no crap, go in there and, do the thing. And then he's got Fennec over there, lounging casually like pirates, drinking her, the sparkly blue rum effectively. It was just a great visual, and I like the idea. I like the aspect of it. There's a lot of questions, though. Is this going to be turning into a crime syndicate scene? Is Boba taking over that type of thing? Is he going to clean it up? You can go in a number of different directions here with this, and I don't know if I'm really curious if they want how they want to position the character. We've redeemed Boba Fett, right? Which you were really excited with the opportunity to do. We equated him with doing good guy stuff, but he still isn't necessarily a good guy, right? And I think this is important to continue to hammer home. He can work in his own self-interest. He's basically done this for the last 5 years or longer than that beforehand, back in the days of the Empire. So I think it's a great plan for him to do something else. And I don't want him to be a good guy still. I want him to just be out for, kind of a loner type of thing. But what do you do for a series? Is this I can't remember all the different variations you gave us. Is it like a 4-issue series? Is it 6, or is it a full show of 8 or 10? And
yeah,
I don't know. So, but Book of Boba sounds kind of like a mini series of sorts, but it also could just be a completely extended series. And I mean, how much Boba can we handle? I guess that's going to be the question we're going to start to have to answer soon.
Yeah.
But what about you? What did it mean to see him on the throne, and where we could go with this?
Okay, so I've got 20 bullet point. No, it's I was pretty excited about the prospect of him being on the throne. I'm still going to I'm with you 100%. I don't believe that Boba Fett is truly a good guy, and my redemption was more about I want to see him I wanted
Don't be
something.
a wimp.
Yeah, don't be a wimp. First and foremost, if he could at least be a reasonable guy and put aside some of the crap that he's had, in the past, aside from and become somebody different. Again, I want him to grow, and I still think he's going to do that. He's just going to do it differently, and so what I'm expecting is this series to be about 4 to 6 episodes, somewhere around there. Maybe it goes to 8. I don't know, but a smaller amount. And it's going to be 2 things. I think one, we're going to get the backstory on what happened, because as much as we've talked about why Boba Fett didn't go after Slave One, or why Boba Fett didn't go after his armor, I think the question comes up of why didn't he just go in there and kill Bib Fortuna a year ago, 2 years ago,
Right.
however long it's been, right? And so now you've got 2-3 things that are out there that are lingering that don't make sense. And so I think the only logical explanation is that he couldn't. And again, I don't know what that is. Again, maybe it's, when he came out of the Sarlacc pit, he was sick. He got nursed back to health. He had memory loss. We've thrown out a lot of theories out there in terms of what had happened. But I want to see this series do 2 things. I want it to give us the backstory. I want it to pick up the minute he falls into the Sarlacc pit. I want to see what that looks like. I want to see him suffering and fighting and clawing his way out, and seeing the other people that are suffering and dying and that just fell in there as well. Bring all those characters back we saw fall down in the pit, and then show him get out of the pit, and then show him hopefully being rescued by Tusken Raiders, and then living amongst the Tusken Raiders as this new person, right? I want to see all of that happen, but as flashbacks, very similar to what we got with Din Djarin, right? And seeing his backstory. The current present day stuff, I do want him to establish himself as I'm going to call him a warlord. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if there's a better term for him, but I do want him to see what he's going through to rebuild this empire, what he wants, because I think where this plays into heavily is Cobb Vanth. Cobb Vanth swore in the novels that he was going to ensure that no one was at least with Freetown. I mean, he didn't say all of Tatooine, or maybe he did. Now I got to go back and look at that. But he at least swore, at least for Freetown, that he was not going to allow a new warlord to step up. And right. You got to wonder how he allowed Din, or why Bib Fortuna is there. But if Boba Fett goes to a point where he's starting to really kind of make Tatooine his place, and he wants to conquer, he's going to start spreading out. And at some point, he's going to bump into Cobb Vanth. And I think that's a great conflict that's going to happen, that you've got these 2 characters that are at each other's at odds with one another, because they want different things. Ultimately, though, I think they position himself to be in a high position of power, so that later on, when we get to the event, where in my head, again, this is pure speculation, but in my head, Mando is coming back to Boba Fett saying, "I need your help. I need your help. I need your army, your pirates, the syndicate that you have. We need to go back and take over Mandalore." Whatever the event is, I think he comes back to Boba Fett and asks for his help, and Boba shows up with all of it. Maybe he saves the day. I don't know, and he's kind of redeemed in that sense. But I think they've got to figure out. It's hard to figure out a way to pull Boba Fett into the position he's in now, because he's just in a totally different world in what he's doing.
Yeah. So do you think if there's a time jump for the Mandalorian show, do you think Book of Boba fills in that gap? Or does it does enough to fill in some of the gap to where it doesn't feel like we're in a completely foreign place when we pick up season 3, if there is maybe a year or 3 years or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I am actually looking forward to a time jump in The Mandalorian. Like 6 months probably feels right.
Yeah,
Maybe I don't. I don't. A year seems too far out. Like too much would happen in a year. But 6 months.
I think you could get to a year, but if you start exceeding that, you're right. I think it's very problematic because what are you out there doing unless you just have you have to show some sort of result from that if you're going to do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely would like to see a time jump there when it comes to it. But yeah, so and again, I think when you take Ahsoka, you take the Rangers of the New Republic, you take the Book of Boba, you take the Mandalorian show, you take all four of these, they're all going to have to come together and work together in some way, right? That's the formula I think that they're concocting here. So how they pull in Boba Fett, who's now in a warlord gangster kind of position, it's going to be tough. Other than just coming to him and say, "We need your help," or he has the keys to something super important, and they're going to have to enlist his help, even though he may be kind of unscrupulous at this point.
But this opens a really important door for us, Albert. There's even more opportunity for Hondo to come back now.
Yes, yeah, no, it does.
So I'm super excited about this.
Yeah,
it makes sense. Like you start to draw how you can get Hondo involved. Now it's starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to the.
That was always the end game. That was the end game for the series, anyway.
Yeah, it was really just a big guy's excuse to get Hondo Tanaka in here. So,
well, the thing about Book of Boba, though, before we wrap up here, like how much time are we going to spend on Tatooine?
I think it's all there. Like I can't see why we wouldn't be on Tatooine the entire time.
Does that bother you?
No,
it makes a lot more sense in this context than keep going back there for random things.
Yeah, I just don't know how much there is to do on Tatooine. Because, like, if you think about it,
it's a ghost town for the most part.
Well, I'm saying it's a ghost planet, right? I mean, he's going to go pick fights with Tusken Raiders. Probably not. If he was, if you follow the theory that he was nurtured back to health by them, then he's probably not going to go pick the fight. He's probably got a good respect for them. They probably respect him, which actually would work well because I think the Tusken Raiders. That was the whole reason they. Not to get, I'm going to get on a tangent here, but the novels, right, with Cobb Vanth, the reason why he was able to enlist the help of the Tusken Raiders back in the novels, in the Aftermath novels, was because there was a hut that they were raising, right? And the Tusken Raiders really respected the huts for what they did. And so maybe this is, he'll fill that gap. But I don't know what the question was.
On the comics too. Yeah.
What was the question? I don't know what the question was now. I don't know why I got started.
Staying on Tatooine.
Oh, yeah, staying on Tatooine. So I just don't know how much there is to do there at this point. So, I mean, we know there's probably other storylines, but he's going to go pick fights with Tusken Raiders. Not. He's going to go pick fights with people at Mos Eisley and Mos Espa and all these other Freetown. I don't know. I don't know how far that's going to go. So maybe they do need to get off planet and do something more.
You think we get any like Crimson Dawn connections, anything like that from other content that we've seen elsewhere?
Crimson Dawn, maybe. It could be other gangsters that are they're fighting against each other. He gets involved in some of that as well. I do like the idea that he comes into a high position of power though, and that Mando needs that or acknowledges that and asks for his help in some way.
I just get concerned that this starts becoming another galactic Civil War scale to where is it going to feel like it should have been a movie, and then you start getting even more parallels and comparisons with the sequel trilogy, which I'm really kind of tired of, and for various reasons. But I just want us to differentiate a little bit from it, and so we don't have all of the, I don't know, just so we don't have all the contention with some of it too. It's just very exhausting sometimes. Of how much are we still going to hold against the sequel trilogy generally for that sect of fans? So I hope we get a little distinction here so it doesn't feel like, wow, this was way more epic than this was. So some concerns that hopefully they'll continue to address with good writing and make them feel complimentary more than anything else.
Okay, so we've talked about which is the better season. Do you have if you had to pick one of the two right now?
Ooh, man, you're coming off the high of this season, right at the end of this one. So it feels like, man, this one was way better, had the payoff you finally wanted. But I think end to end, though, if you were to take the whole season as a whole, I still think season one was a better season overall. It had a very clear story arc, not a lot of fluff or filler in the middle of it. You got a lot of variation, a lot of variety. This season felt a lot more fan servicey. There were a lot of awesome moments. Don't get me wrong, but there were a couple filler things here and there. And then but then we got this huge payoff, and I was really surprised all the great moments we got in chapter 15. So it's really easy to see why a lot of people are saying, well, season 2 was better. But I think end to end overall, season 1 probably still takes it for me. What about you?
I would say I'm probably more a season 2 fan, although I see your argument 100%. Like there's something really exciting about season 1 and not knowing anything about it. And then you can't dismiss the big reveal at the end of the first episode, right? Nobody saw this coming. It was completely, it was a milestone moment in Star Wars legacies and Star Wars history, right? That we would see another Yoda species like that. Completely just dumb. We were all dumbfounded by the fact that we had seen that. So I don't want to dismiss anything there or undermine it, but I think season 2 was probably a little bit more, I'm not going to say tighter in terms of story, but it felt like it felt a little bit more fun than season 1. And and to be fair, it's probably because we have more depth. These characters, they were already well established already. We knew what they did in season 1. We got to introduce some new characters. Some of the old characters came back. There was more depth to them than we had in the first season as well. So I think all of that kind of played into it. But I mean, honestly, it's, where we ended and where I think the potential for this next couple seasons to go, on top of the fact that we now see that there's a bigger picture here that's being painted for us, kind of gives it a little bit of an edge for me. But man, it's just ever so slightly in that.
And I think I'm just barely on the other side of that for you. The connected tissue of the previous season just felt a little more all one story. But this one had a lot of great moments though. Cobb Vanth, the Crate Dragon. I mean, even the whole spider thing, which was pretty gnarly and different.
Yeah.
Was still really cool. And
Frog Lady. The child eating eggs.
Yeah, the egg dissection we had to do. I guess really Baby Yoda's digestive system dissection.
Yeah.
For no pun intended, I guess.
Yeah, no. We had a Bo Katan, Dark Troopers.
Yeah, there were a lot of great things in there, right? And the reveal of the Mandalorians coming out. There were still so many great moments. So another really solid season for a show that's still really doing really well. For any of the disappointment anyone may have had at pockets here and there, it's still going strong, and they ended on an exceptional note here. And then, man, really teased something big to come here.
Oh yeah, Ahsoka Tano. Man, I forgot about her.
Yeah, Ahsoka. Yeah, some little character known as Ahsoka.
Yeah. Okay, only 2 questions left, and we'll be done here. The next question is really about, let's focus on season 3. Where do you think season 3 picks up at? Oh, and so let me clarify one thing too. There's been a lot of people talking about whether Book of Boba is season 3 or is it going to be a completely different series altogether. Friday night, I got it on good word from somebody that I really trust. It's in the know. Said it was going to be 2 different seasons or 2 different episodes or series. There's been more and more people coming forward and saying that they will be 2 different seasons. Paul Bateman is one of them. He was a former Lucasfilm person. He hangs out on Rebel Force Radio quite a bit. He's a very trustworthy guy in terms of knowledge. He's come forward and said he's seen the shooting schedules and that they are different. So that would imply that they're 2 different series. Although Lucasfilm has not officially announced this, all indications point that this will be 2 separate seasons. And I think it makes sense, right? If you got Mandalorian starting around Christmas of 2021, you're probably going to get Book of Boba if it's a smaller series just prior to that, right?
Right.
So I think it all adds up. But anyway, so your thoughts, I guess, on just season 3 and not the Book of Boba.
Well, and I agree with you. I think they're going to be separate because it was really surprising when they said season 3 would be around Christmas. Because that's a whole 2 months later. Now it makes a lot more sense because they're going to have, and I think this probably lends a lot of credibility. Book of Boba is going to be a shorter run, 3, 4, probably 4 episodes, something like that. Season 3. I mean, I think we jump ahead a little bit. 6 months to a year seems pretty safe. Get a little more organization. What's going on behind the scenes? We start down the path of how we're going to retake Mandalore, and I think that's going to be the arc of season 3. I'm right there with you. I think we get a lot more Bo Katan. I'm hoping she's in half the episode, something closer to that effect.
Right.
It will be interesting how Grogu might come back into this, if that's a season 3 type of activity, or if that's something they want to have pay off later down the road. It's a little interesting how they would get back to that. But I think, and so do we see other characters like Mayfeld come back? Because now we kind of like Mayfeld, where before we were a bit meh about him, but now he's a really deeper, more interesting character. I think the other thing we get with Siege of Mandalore, I think we start to see again more First Order things start to come out. We don't, they've got Moff Gideon, so Moff Gideon's still around. He's still alive. He's a prisoner. Presumably, that's going to create some sort of conflict as well. So, are we going to have kind of a dual front thing going on now? With we've got this threat of the First Order. We've got Mandalorians starting to try to reunite. Is there a conflict there that then reveals what's actually going on, what the plans of the Imperial Remnant really looks like?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to season 3, focusing on. I was thinking the event would be the resurrection of, or I don't know what you would call it, liberation maybe of Mandalore. I don't know what they're going to call it. I was hoping that would be like the end game event, but now it's starting to feel like this is the end game thing is going to be like a Snoke coming into power, or early shades of the First Order coming in, or maybe even Thrawn coming back, right? I mean, he could probably play into all of this as well, because they've got to. The thing is, the tricky thing about all this is they got to clean all this up before they get to Bloodline, right? Because at Bloodline, we don't get any. There's no talk of all this, and they could just easily write it off as like, okay, no, it was so long ago, no one talks about it. But there are some pretty big things happening here, right? That we're seeing, and you got to wonder, like, if Mandalore is back, where the heck were they during anything that happened between now or whenever that happens, and the Force Awakens, or the Rise of Skywalker, or the First Order coming into power? Like, where were they? What were they doing? They've got to explain that, and so I think it's a slippery slope, and it's going to be a fine line that they got to walk through, in order to kind of tell that story. But I think if they can at least tell that story, and maybe it falls down again, who knows? I mean, Mandalore has been so up and down over the thousands of years that it's been around.
Right.
Maybe it's not a fraction of what it was by the time the First Order comes to power, and we get to see the might of the First Order kind of take down the Mandalorians, even though they are unified once again, and the Darksaber's out there, and Bo Katan or Mandalorians leading them, or all that. I think that's kind of what they're playing up here and leading up to at some point, because they said it's a big event, and I can't think of anything bigger right now, unless they're just completely going to blindside us with something completely new.
Yeah, and again, where does Thrawn fit? Does Thrawn fit more in an Ahsoka series, or are we going to start setting him up here? And we've got Jackson's in there kind of asking this as well. He believes they're setting up Thrawn. And that's a very real possibility. I mean, and do we see him, like you were mentioning last week, is it Gideon is a student of Thrawn type of thing? And do we start to see that evolution? Because again, presumably Thrawn's got a fleet too, right? So there's a lot of might there. But how do you mix all this stuff in? How do you get it blended in with the Mandalorian story? And like Gideon was saying, it's all about the story. And I would really like to see that. I would like to see what has gone on to get us to this point as it pertains to Mandalore specifically, and the Mandalorian, kind of strife of what they've experienced, and get more of the idea of what can we answer the question kind of in a more final way about the Purge, and what exactly we're referencing there. Is it things we've already seen, or did it go long? Was it a second Purge type of thing? Can we get some clarity around what that actually looks like, and push that story? Because we've seen flashbacks work really well for us. Now we can also go back and integrate some of that with coming into new characters and pulling some of them out. And again, we still have open doors for Sabine and other folks too. And again, can it culminate into some big epic type of event that's going to all the streams are going to converge at the same time? And that all seems to be setting up like a Thrawn or a Snoke or something like that.
Yeah.
Thrawn makes a lot of sense, because you could then do something else after that. But a huge payoff would be someone like Snoke, or something to that effect, the reveal of the First Order type of thing. But I'm with you. Bloodlines has got to still factor in. We've seen them get tweak a little bit with the storylines, just a touch to tweak and maybe adjust some of what we've already read. And I think the books, unfortunately, are a bit of a casualty sometimes in that. But we saw them remain pretty true to Cobb Vanth, so there's no reason why we wouldn't expect that Bloodlines is still going to be very much a almost verbatim canon type of thing. But it'll be interesting how they fit all this stuff in. I mean, gosh, we're going to see a Leia.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. So the last question I have for you is the last thing I want to talk about really is Luke Skywalker, because it's kind of the elephant in the room, right?
Right.
But in terms of Luke Skywalker, they've done a pretty bold thing here. Okay, they've broken the seal in introducing arguably the largest character in the galaxy right now, into this little storyline that's happened, this little side quest that's called The Mandalorian, right? You think about in the grand scheme of things, it's a small piece of what's happening in the galaxy at this point. And they've just inserted the largest person in the galaxy in Luke Skywalker. And so I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on how you feel about Luke Skywalker coming in. Do you think this opens up the gates for somebody like Han, Chewie, name it, Akbar? I mean, there's tons of people. We can go on and on about all these folks that we know are still around at this point. And are we going to see them? Why wouldn't they bring them in now? Why can't they go in and intermix with what's happening in The Mandalorian at this point? That all it seems pretty exciting. I'll give you my thoughts, but what do you think about that?
So I think if we continue to work on the outskirts of the greater Republic, which this show has done a pretty good job of doing, we've just kind of flirted with it. We've skipped into it and skipped out of it. As long as we keep working on the fringe of that, I don't think we need those characters. And again, we were always really worried about Luke showing up or even a Boba showing up. And our fears have really not, materialized in any kind of real way. Boba had a lot of great moments. Luke had a fantastic moment. Did it take away from all the other characters? At the end of the day, no. We still had the bond between Grogu and Din, and that still felt more. That's what we felt about, aside from our excitement. And so you have to differentiate a bit here. But I think as long as they keep working on the fringes here, and what does the New Republic have an interest in the Mandalorians or in Mandalore?
Yeah.
Presumably not. They've got their hands full of sorts already. But does the Empire view them as a threat? That seems a little more likely in that kind of realm. So as long as we continue to work on the outsides of that, of that bubble, I think we can avoid Han and Chewie and characters like that, or maybe even a Lando, right? I mean, Lando's another one that could come in and have something there. But again, the age of the characters, they're probably gauging how well Luke is going over with the fans as well. So seeing some of those characters, Chewie is always a great one because Chewie can be Chewie, and Jonas is in great shape and not going anywhere for any time soon. So I'm not against it, but it worked for Luke because there was a reason for him to be there, right? It made sense for him to be there. We didn't have to suspend everything in order for it to be him. That made a lot of sense and it worked. So as long as we keep making sense and we keep building the story before we get to those moments, I think we're going to be okay. And whatever is presented to us, I think it's going to be acceptable, or it's going to make sense and we're going to feel really good about it. So what's your theory?
Well, I don't know if I have a theory so much around Luke Skywalker and whether he comes back. Well, I guess I kind of do. My thoughts around Luke Skywalker is, and so for the record, once again, let me say my favorite character has always been Luke.
Yeah.
Sometimes Ezra bubbles up there just because I connect with him in a lot of stupid ways. But Luke Skywalker, I'm a child of the 70s, grew up with the original trilogy. Luke Skywalker is my favorite character. I will say, and I've said this many times in the show, I did not want Luke Skywalker to come back. I was adamantly against him coming back. One, because I was worried that he would upstage everybody. And your point's well taken. Like, you look back at that episode and you can talk about Luke Skywalker all day long, but it's the moment between Grogu and Din kind of was on another level, in my opinion.
Still takes center stage.
It takes still center stage, right? So the way they used him, I thought was smart. Mm-hmm. The only problem I have with it is, again, if he goes away and is not constantly coming back, then I think it's fine, because then it pulls away from this small, quaint story that I like, where they have a lot of freedom to do and tell any kind of a story they want to, because they don't have to worry about the Lukes and the Leias and the Hans and all the crap that we know is going to happen, right? And I think that's what's so liberating about something like the High Republic. You read those books and you're like, man, none of these guys are around, and they can do what they can tell the stories they want to tell. And so that was my fear, I guess, around Luke Skywalker and just kind of him showing up like that. I said he was too big for the show. I think he's too big for the show to be a reoccurring character, making appearances here and there. I think if they're going to play up an event and they're culminating this huge event, then I think it's going to make sense that somebody like Luke Skywalker is going to show up and save the day, or somebody like Ezra is finally going to show up, right? Maybe they play that out for a long time, that they're still looking for Ezra, and then suddenly in a dire moment when they need somebody to show up and kind of turn the tide of a battle, Ezra finally reappears out of wherever he's been and saves the day. I think that would be a great story to tell. But the one thing I guess a couple things I want to say before we get out of here. One, for anybody that fears that somehow Kylo Ren, Ben Solo is going to kill Grogu, it's not gonna. He didn't kill anybody in the jet. Go read Charles Soule's comic books, right? The Rise of Kylo Ren. Just briefly, he's there. Luke almost tries to kill him. He's freaking out, brings everything down. He thinks he's killed Luke Skywalker, and then he runs out like he's going to go to the Jedi Temple, and suddenly he sees it's on fire. The next thing you know, the entire temple blows up, and he's panicking. He's a kid. He's worried. He doesn't know what's going on. Later on, people show up. Everybody starts assuming that he did it, even though he didn't do it. And then when he confronts the Knights of Ren, they ask him, like, so, why are you such a, badass person, cool person? And he's like, well, I just killed a bunch of people at the Jedi Temple. He's saying that because he's trying to get, have some street cred of why they need to let him into their ranks. Right. Somehow there's all this crap out there right now that's going around saying that Ben Solo is going to kill Grogu. And it's just not how it happened. Okay. So let me put that aside now that I've made my peace with that one. Going back to Luke Skywalker though, the other part that I want to talk about was how it feeds into the sequel trilogy and how it feeds into the naysayers of the sequel trilogy or the Rian Johnson haters and all that. We have to remember that Rian Johnson was wholeheartedly out there defending, when The Last Jedi came out, he was defending Luke Skywalker because he kept saying that this was a character that was not the Luke Skywalker that we saw in Return of the Jedi, that some 34 years had passed at this point, right? And that things happened to him. And so we didn't get to see all of that. What we got was a completely different character that had been changed in a lot of different ways, to the point where he had exiled himself and completely detached himself from the Force and all of that. And you don't have to like that character, but I think you have to accept that was who he was. They are not course correcting here. They're not going and retconning things here. Right. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, or any creators, agnostic of the series, creators don't go in with the intent of how can we satisfy fans to the point where we're going to tick off a bunch of other people. That's not what they do. They go in with the intent to tell the story that they want to tell. You may not like that story. It may not resonate with you, but they're not going in there to appease people, right? And that's what's happening here. I get it. With a skeptical eye, or a cynical eye, I should say, you can see what's happening in The Mandalorian and look at that and go, wow, they are trying to show us what Star Wars, quote, is about, right? They're doing the hold my beer thing. That's not what's happening here. They are doing exactly what Rian Johnson said that happened. He said, and Luke Skywalker said it too, right? I was the legendary Luke Skywalker. I was this great hero. Well, guess what? You're going to get to see all that. You can't say that it didn't happen because we know it happened. You're now getting to see it happen here, like in The Mandalorian, which is great because for those of us, like we started off with the show, we always wanted to see more of that legendary character, the person that we all had in our head and envisioned Luke Skywalker to be. We're getting to finally see that. That's a great thing. It doesn't change the fact that I think we're going to see, if they continue to bring him in, whether it's in this series, other series, movies, books, comics, whatever they do between now and that 34 years that passes, or 24 at this point, because we're 10 years past. But then over the next 24 years, I think we get to see the legendary part. But keep in mind, we're going to see where this all starts to weigh on his shoulders. We're going to see where he's going to make mistakes. We're going to see the transformation of Luke Skywalker. And right now, everything's great. Everything's wonderful. All these people love Luke Skywalker, that he's back. And we got to see him, in his prime and doing things that we'd always wanted him to do, like he did, like his father did, Anakin Skywalker. Mm-hmm. But it is going to change. And I think it's great. I think we get to see. And so all this does is, I think it plays and enforces the character of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I think it's going to rationalize, and I think we're going to get to see why that is a different person than we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi. So I don't see how it just flies in the face, honestly, of the sequel trilogy. If anything, it just reinforces everything about the Luke Skywalker that we got there. And you should be happy. You should be happy that we're getting all this, right? This is what everybody wanted. It doesn't change anything, though, with the sequel trilogy. And it certainly doesn't change anything with The Last Jedi or the Luke Skywalker that I know a lot of people didn't like. So that's
right. We're still at the stage of ascension for Luke and for the Jedi. We know there's a lot more. I mean, there's only a handful of years after the fall of the Empire. So there's still a lot more building that has to happen. I mean, Ben Solo, isn't a thing for a number of years.
Right.
There's still a lot of things that have to happen. There's a lot of positivity that goes into the story of Luke, but also we'll probably start to see those flaws start to come through, that they're not perfect. And we'll start to see some of the character development that we just got to see the residual aspect of it. So I'm with you. This isn't a retcon at any type of thing. This is where he's at in this part of the story. And I think it fits perfectly. It's still in this age of hope, age of building up the Jedi Order, restoring some sort of Jedi presence, whatever we want to call that. And I think it fits perfectly within that. And man, it was great to see him on screen. I was worried he was going to be there. I was worried it was going to take things away. I was worried what he was going to look like. And so, but, I mean, there was a lot of much ado about nothing of sorts. It worked really well. I'm with you. I don't need him coming in and out of the story a whole lot. This isn't Luke Skywalker's story. If he starts to come in, and that's why it was important for Boba, we established him for a few episodes, and then he needs to move to his own deal. We can bring him back together.
Right.
But he needs to kind of move on to his own world, because again, this is not Boba's story.
Exactly.
Boba will have his own opportunity. You get your own show, Boba. Everybody gets a show.
Everybody gets a show at this point.
Right. But this is still Din's story, even though maybe now is becoming a bit of maybe a Bo Katan type of story. But again, it's more Din's journey to wherever he's actually going. And I think it's really important we remain focused on that. And, the kid is not in the picture anymore. So what does that look like post Grogu? Even if they get reunited at some point, what does the post Grogu look like? What's the effect of him as a character? There's so many interesting things you can do with this. Of what life does he go back to? He's been protecting this kid for the better part of, I don't know, we'll call this maybe a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, there's so many things left to explore. And Luke was a great moment in time for this, but I don't see Luke really coming back. I'm not seeing a need for him to come back, but great to see him. Glad it's consistent with the story we know to be true. And it's still all canon, and all the canon is still fitting together here. So I'm with you. I think it's be happy for what we have. I know that's not a great comment that people don't like, but be happy for what we have, because we got something really, really good.
Yeah.
And it fits. And we'll just leave it at that, I suppose.
Yeah. There's we'll have to come back. I mean, don't freak out. I mean, we're already at 2.5 hours, and so we need to get out of here. But at the same time, there's still a lot of stuff we haven't even touched on. Like, we haven't talked about, prospects of Moff Gideon, what happens to him. I know we talked about Mandalore being kind of a focal point for season 3, which I think is probably going to come to fruition. But there's a lot more, like, so what happened with the, what happens with Pershing? What happens with the blood? Does that need to come back up, right? There's a lot of questions here. And I think at some point we will come back. Well, we will. It's not even a thought. We will come back and do a speculation show on season 3. And spend more time on that. So, and certainly we'll do a Q&A episode very soon. So if you got burning questions about The Mandalorian, that's probably going to be a good opportunity to get them out there, or just come hang out with us in Discord and get our immediate thoughts and opinions around some of that stuff as well. So,
and I'm totally fine with them continuing along that line of the story of, what is the Empire actually up to? Because they're already curious, and it's a threat to them as much as anybody else. So I think it makes a lot of sense to still stay on that story path too, and keep seeing it through to the end.
Yep. Okay. Before the very last thing I promise is congratulations once again to Colin Brixey and Mandy Jakubka for winning the Apprentice and Master packages. Thank you for everybody that joined us tonight for the live show. It was a lot of people showed up, so we really appreciate all of the interaction. There were a lot of comments. I couldn't even keep up with them at some point, or at many points, I guess, throughout all of this. So thank you for everybody coming out here and spending 2.5 hours to talk about this really crucial, pivotal episode of The Mandalorian. Just a show note, or I guess a episode note here. We've got, I think we're going to take the next 2 weeks off. So we will be back sometime in January. I think the first week of January. Is that right? I don't have the calendar in front of me.
I think that sounds right.
Yes. First week in January, we'll come back. I think we're going to hit the High Republic, if I'm not mistaken. Although we haven't really talked about it, but Jonesy's got access to the books now. I've already had a chance to read them all. So I've already started in show notes very lightly, but we'll come back and talk about that. And I think what we're going to do is a kind of like a High Republic kickoff. So we'll do a show, kind of an overview show of setting the stage and filling in all the gaps and what you should know going into the series. Maybe kind of spoilerish, but we'll certainly try to keep away from that, because that's not what we do here. But then, yeah, we're going to start breaking down all the books as they come out and really kind of enjoy the High Republic for what it is. And it's just, again, so liberating. That's all I can say. It's just so great. And it feels Star Wars, unequivocally feels Star Wars, which is what you want in a Star Wars novel.
It's fresh. I mean, that's the thing, is we get to get a different take on it. We got some fantastic writers part of this. Charles Soule, Claudia Gray, and I mean, a whole cast of people who are involved with this. So these are great writers. We've loved their content elsewhere. So high expectations going in, but the early returns are quite positive. So we've got a whole new playground, whole new sandbox to play around in.
Yep. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, Jonesy, any final words before we get out of here?
No, it's 5 days before Christmas in 2020 when we're recording this. So happy holidays, everyone. Please be safe. Take care of one another, and we will see you after the new year.
Yep. Happy holidays. We'll see you guys soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.